Welcome to those of you joining us for our live coverage of NASA and SpaceX's Crew-12 mission to the International Space Station. We are now inside the final hour, or roughly, we're getting close to the final hour before liftoff, currently at T-minus 1 hour and 10 minutes, as we move into this critical phase of the countdown. In a moment, we will be joined by our colleagues at SpaceX. To reintroduce you to all of you out there watching, I'm NASA's Daryl Nail, and for the past hour, I've been joined by this man, Wheels, NASA astronaut and U.S. Army Colonel Doug Wheelock, a veteran space flyer who's been helping break down today's mission and answering your questions, and you've been doing a great job at it. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate that, Daryl. So exciting to be here with you.
Sharing your knowledge and your information and your experience has been a tremendous value to this broadcast. Crew-12 is launching from Space Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. We're lifting off at 5:15 and 55 seconds a.m. Eastern Time. And as we mentioned, it's just a little more than an hour away. Once this crew arrives at the station, they will join Expedition 74. Now here's a look back at how this morning unfolded as the crew prepared for launch. The day began inside the historic astronaut crew quarters, where SpaceX teams helped each crew member into their custom pressure suits. Before heading out, the crew paused for a final pre-launch tradition right here, gathering around the table for a card game, a way to set the tone and leave any bad luck behind. Then it was time to step outside. There they are, walking the path walked by every NASA astronaut since Apollo 7 in 1968. A short time later, the crew climbed into their Teslas after saying goodbye to their families and loved ones. Then in pairs, after they arrived to the launch pad, they checked out their rocket, got their close-up look at the Falcon 9. There you see them walking right next to the rocket, which is right there before they climbed the launch tower. And then in pairs, they walked across the crew access arm. First the commander and pilot, then the two mission specialists, and then we saw them climb into their Dragon and get into their seats for flight. As you see here, they articulated their seats, basically rotating them into position. They did their suit leak checks and their comm checks as the countdown continued. And now we are back live, watching them live, both on the pad and inside the spacecraft, strapped inside Dragon Freedom, waiting on the next major milestone on the road to liftoff. It's been a good journey, and we've been tracking it the whole way. Wheels?
Absolutely, yep. And now things are going to start to pick up once we get inside of an hour. You'll hear some things on the loops that will be sequence tests that go on as we get ready for launch as well.
And with that hatch closed, I imagine there's a very specific type of quiet inside that capsule, inside the spacecraft.
There's a little bit of nervousness that goes on. I'm sure that Jack will provide some dad jokes to sort of lighten the atmosphere a little bit. But yeah, it's game time. So it's the crew is getting into the zone. They're probably talking about maybe reviewing in their mind their initial steps, and so they're ready to go.
All right, speaking of ready to go, at this time, we're expanding our coverage to include our partners at SpaceX. So let's welcome in our team joining us live from Hawthorne, California. Good morning. Or in your case, good evening. Are you still on yesterday? Yeah, I think so. Well, no, it looks like you're with us. You're today.
It's good morning. Thanks, Daryl. I'm Jessie Anderson, a senior production and engineering manager here at SpaceX.
And I'm Sandra Jones with NASA Communications. We are excited to be joining you once again from Hawthorne. It is always a pleasure to be here, especially today as we count down to liftoff of Crew-12 just over an hour from now. As the name suggests, Crew-12 is our 12th operational mission with SpaceX, flying astronauts for long-duration missions to the International Space Station, and the 13th as a part of NASA's Commercial Crew Program with SpaceX.
Today's crew will fly aboard Dragon Freedom, which first supported NASA's Crew-4 mission in 2022, and since then has flown several missions, including Axiom missions 2 and 3 and NASA's Crew-9. Crew-12 will be Dragon's 17th visit to the space station with crew on board and its 20th human spaceflight mission overall.
So let's meet today's crew. In the commander's seat is NASA astronaut Jessica Meir, who spent a total of 205 days in space on her first spaceflight back in 2019 and was part of the first all-female spacewalks. She holds a biology degree from Brown University. Next to Meir is pilot Jack Hathaway, making his very first flight to space. The Connecticut native earned bachelor's degrees in physics and history from the U.S. Naval Academy, and he has more than 2,500 flight hours in 30 types of aircraft and has flown 39 combat missions during several military operations.
Serving as a mission specialist is Sophie Adenot, representing the European Space Agency, or ESA. The French native studied engineering and specialized in spacecraft and aircraft flight dynamics during undergraduate work in France and received her master's degree from MIT. This will also be her first trip to space. And rounding out this crew is Roscosmos cosmonaut and mission specialist Andrey Fedyaev. As a major in the Russian Air Force, he's logged more than 500 hours in Russian aircraft. Back in 2023, he launched as a mission specialist as part of Crew-6, where he spent nearly 186 days aboard the International Space Station.
Once on board the International Space Station, Crew-12 will become members of Expedition 74 and add to the milestone of over 25 years of humans living and working aboard the International Space Station. Crew-12 will contribute to hundreds of experiments aimed at advancing research and technology for missions to the Moon and Mars and to benefit humanity back on Earth. This research includes using the unique microgravity environment of the space station to study pneumonia-causing bacteria and how they can lead to long-term damage in the heart. This research could lead to new methods to manage cardiovascular health and infectious diseases here on Earth. So we're looking forward to hearing more about the research that continues to take place on Space Station later in today's broadcast and how it helps NASA prepare to return to the Moon and go on to Mars. But for now, let's check in with another member here in Hawthorne, Kate Tice. Kate, how's it going?
Hey, Sandra, thank you, and good morning to all of you watching. I'm Kate Tice, Senior Quality Systems Engineering Manager here at SpaceX, and I'm excited to be joining you again today from right outside Mission Control in Hawthorne, as you can see just over my shoulder. Now, as we continue to count down to launch, we'll walk you through what to watch for as the clock nears T0. It continues to be a smooth countdown, and we're looking good for an on-time liftoff at 5:15 a.m. Eastern Time from Space Launch Complex 40 in Florida. Coming up here at T-minus 45 minutes, we'll be listening for the team to report their readiness for propellant load with a final go, no-go poll. Now, here on the ground in Hawthorne, Mission Control is staffed around the clock to monitor Dragon and the mission all the way from launch to docking. The same teams that you see right there on your screen today will hand off the mission from shift to shift, maintaining continuous awareness from liftoff through rendezvous and docking with the space station and all the way through splashdown when the crew returns home. Inside that room there, Mission Control, there are 6 key positions on console today, and each of them are focused on a specific aspect of the mission. The mission director is the person leading the room. They coordinate the team and make real-time decisions to ensure mission success. The mission director, who you will hear referred to as MD when we talk to them on the nets.
Dragon, SpaceX, for your awareness, ground is stepping into cycling the orbit tank isolation valves to equalize low flow pressure. Dragon copy.
All right, so that the comms there, I'll get to that person in just a moment. The mission director who I was referring to, that individual also supports the Falcon launch director, or LD, during the countdown. Now, the voice that you just heard is our crew operations and resources engineer. You see there on your screen. Today, we refer to that person as core throughout the broadcast. Our core today is Mary Cooper, and she will be the primary voice talking to the crew while they are on board Dragon on the way to space. Now, the remaining operators are focused on Dragon systems, including avionics, guidance and control, software, propulsion, life support, and coordination with ground support teams. And across the country, our Falcon 9 and Dragon teams, along with key NASA launch personnel, are stationed in the Launch and Landing Control Center at SpaceX's Hangar X in Florida. Now, as we move inside the final hour, teams across both rooms will be reviewing data from their final checkouts in preparation for retraction of the crew access arm and the start of propellant loading. But the teams in Hawthorne and Cape Canaveral aren't the only ones supporting today's mission.
That's right, Kate. NASA has its own team at the Johnson Space Center in Mission Control in Houston, Texas, who will be checking in with us as we progress toward today's launch. This is where NASA's Anna Schneider is located, who will share the latest updates from Mission Control as they have been busy preparing the International Space Station for Dragon's arrival. The team over in Houston recently gave their go for launch, confirming the station and its systems are ready to receive the Dragon, Freedom, and the new crew. Following liftoff, today's flight to the International Space Station will take about 34 hours, with Dragon flying autonomously the entire way.
SpaceX, you have a go for step 5.1. When ready, report go for launch.
Dragon copies, go for 5.1.
And we will continue to hear communications from the ground to the crew inside Dragon Freedom as they step through those procedures. We're now less than an hour away from today's launch, but tomorrow we'll be looking ahead towards docking, which is targeted for February 14th at 3:15 p.m. Eastern to the Zenith port of Harmony. And just like an autopilot on a commercial aircraft, the crew always has the ability to take manual control of the spacecraft if needed.
Right, we are at T-minus 58 minutes and 42 seconds and counting, and launching a rocket takes a considerable amount of teamwork. During launch, SpaceX is monitoring the health of the vehicles from here in Hawthorne and Kennedy, and our recovery team is supporting out at sea. NASA teams at Johnson Space Center in Texas are monitoring crew and mission rules. Once Dragon makes it to orbit, SpaceX and Johnson will work in tandem during Dragon's approach to station. Johnson then takes the lead for station operations. So let's check in with NASA's Anna Schneider at the Johnson Space Center to see how things are shaping up in Mission Control Houston. How's it going, Anna?
Hey, thanks, Jesse, and welcome back to Mission Control Houston inside the International Space Station Flight Control Room at the Johnson Space Center here in Houston, Texas. We are, of course, here in the hub of human spaceflight for NASA. Currently on console is the Orbit 1 team of flight controllers being led by Flight Director Garrett Hain, and this team of flight directors recently pulled a go for launch, which means the International Space Station is ready for Crew-12 to lift off and begin their journey to the orbiting laboratory. At the time of launch, the space station will be traveling 260 miles over the South Pacific east of New Zealand. Docking is targeted for tomorrow at 2:15 p.m. Central, 3:15 p.m. Eastern, and in the home stretch of the rendezvous tomorrow, NASA and SpaceX flight controllers will enter into integrated operations. During integrated operations, both flight control teams will conduct a series of go, no-go polls for Dragon Freedom as it closes in to docking to the zenith or space-facing port of the station's Harmony module. Rotational missions like Crew-12 help NASA to continue to maximize the important research and technology demonstrations made possible only in the International Space Station's unique microgravity environment. The International Space Station is critical for NASA as it prepares for future low Earth orbit destinations. Working alongside U.S. commercial partners, NASA is enabling the development of sustainable destinations that will maintain America's presence in low Earth orbit and continue to support groundbreaking research. The space station also helps us to better understand and overcome the challenges of long-duration spaceflight, which will be necessary for a long-term presence on the moon and crewed missions to deeper into the solar system, including Mars. That's all for me here in Mission Control Houston for now, and with that, we will hand it back to the Kennedy Space Center with Steve Seiseloff.
Good morning, everyone. I am here with NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman. And Mr. Administrator, you've talked a lot about low Earth orbit research and its value, both in terms of research and in terms of crew training. What do you see for the International Space Station during your term?
Well, first of all, I mean, the International Space Station is such a success story already. I mean, you know, between the international cooperation it took to build it, you're looking at maybe one of the greatest engineering accomplishments, you know, in modern history. I mean, 25 years of continuous operation up there. I think the goal right now is to maximize the remaining life on it to the greatest extent possible. So, you know, as our astronauts prepare to go up and undertake the mission that Crew-12 is launching on right now, the idea is to get the highest potential science and research up there to unlock and ignite an orbital economy so that someday we have lots of you know, commercially operated space stations in low Earth orbit, and also to demonstrate a lot of the technology that we intend to use on lunar missions and a lunar base in the future. A great example would be it's a great testing ground for future lunar EVA suits to be able to exercise that on the space station. So we're going to make an awful lot of use of the station over its remaining life. We're going to keep our crews extremely busy up there.
And also, we're preparing this morning to launch Crew-12 to low Earth orbit to the International Space Station, and then going to send another crew around the moon in just a few weeks. Space agencies don't typically do those kind of missions right on top of each other. What does that say about NASA?
I'd say we're just getting started right now, but you're certainly seeing American space capabilities being showcased. We were able to bring Crew-11 home early while pulling forward Crew-12, which is obviously getting ready to launch in less than an hour right now, while we have crews out there testing for Artemis II. We're doing a series of kind of mini wet dress rehearsal tests today. Make sure we give that vehicle the highest probability of success to get off the pad in early March. What a great problem to have. Multiple crew-rated vehicles out on the pad right now. I hope this becomes more commonplace to such an extent that maybe in the years ahead, having 2 vehicles ready to go to space with astronauts seems like an easy day.
Excellent. Well, there you have it. Words from our new NASA Administrator, Jared Isaacman, and we're going to go back to Daryl Nail.
All right, thank you very much, Stephen and Administrator Isaacman. Great to hear from him as you know, we see this shot orbiting Launch Complex 40.
Falcon 9 is the first orbital-class rocket capable of reflight. Together, Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy have completed more than 600 launches. And we can't have reflights without landings. Today's mission will actually be our first landing at Landing Zone 40 in Cape Canaveral, which is our newest recovery site. Now, while today's booster is on its second trip to space after most recently supporting a SpaceX Starlink mission, we're working towards qualifying our fleet of Falcon boosters and fairings to support 40 missions each. Reusability allows SpaceX to refly the most expensive parts of the rocket, which in turn drives down the cost of space access. Our current Falcon 9 flight leader has flown 32 flights, and across the fleet, we've completed more than 500 reflights. Another innovation SpaceX has been working on is the intravehicular spacesuits, or IVA suits, that astronauts wear during Dragon missions. The new IVA suit debuted during the Crew-11 mission last year, worn by NASA astronaut Mike Fink. The design incorporates changes developed for the Polaris Dawn mission's extravehicular activity, or EVA suit, and will ultimately help us scale suit production and aid our ability to manufacture IVA suits in the numbers needed to make life multiplanetary.
And for today's mission, all astronauts on board are wearing the new IVA suit. And the Crew-12 astronauts are staying comfortable in their spacesuits right now as they prepare for liftoff, now in 48 minutes from now. They'll remain suited up through the launch portion of today and during dynamic events, but once on orbit, they will be able to get out of their spacesuits and get comfortable for the remainder of the ride uphill before getting suited back up shortly before docking to the International Space Station for their science and research mission as a key stepping stone to NASA's Moon to Mars efforts.
SpaceX shares NASA's goal of returning to the moon, approaching the mission with the same determination that returned human spaceflight capability to America under NASA's Commercial Crew program, and building a self-growing city on the moon in the next 10 years. To unlock that future, SpaceX's team has completed dozens of milestones tied to developing systems, infrastructure, and operations needed to safely land astronauts on the moon. While many of SpaceX's remaining HLS milestones are tied to flight tests, such as ship-to-ship propellant transfer demonstration, SpaceX is fabricating a flight-capable Starship HLS cabin that will demonstrate high design maturity for the system supporting humans on the moon and provide a highly realistic training experience for future astronauts.
With NASA's Artemis campaign, we are exploring the moon for scientific discovery, technology, advancement, and to learn how to live and work on another world as we prepare for sending humans to missions to Mars. The upcoming Artemis II mission will carry NASA astronauts Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Cook, and CSA astronaut Jeremy Hansen on a 10-day test flight mission around the moon to prove out key systems on the Orion spacecraft ahead of a future lunar landing mission. By leveraging NASA's unique and historic experience in lunar exploration paired with the speed and innovation of industry, the HLS program is providing the key lunar landing capability for Artemis to achieve a long-term human presence in deep space. NASA is working with SpaceX to develop the company's Starship human landing system for future missions.
Cargo variants of the Starship lander will be capable of landing unparalleled capacity directly on the surface, including large pieces of equipment and infrastructure. SpaceX was founded to make life multiplanetary, and Starship has been designed from the very beginning to enable the exploration of other worlds. With it, and alongside NASA, we look forward to inspiring all of humanity as that first permanent foothold is placed among the stars.
It continues.
The poll is complete, and the team is ready for crew access arm retract, propellant load, and launch. For all operators in MCCX and Hangar X, both control rooms will go into lockdown at T-minus 45 minutes and will remain in that state until the launch escape system is disarmed. All operators are to remain at their console and maintain a sterile cockpit until MD confirms successful disarming of the launch escape system following orbit insertion or propellant offload in the event of a scrub. For non-urgent no-go conditions, brief the CEO or LD and they will approve aborting the countdown. For urgent issues affecting the safety of the operation, operators shall call hold on the countdown net. Launch control will abort the launch auto sequence immediately and proceed into the launch abort auto sequence. At T-minus 10 seconds, launch control will be hands-off and relying on automated abort criteria for the remainder of the count. Operators shall advise the launch director whether structural breakup or fire is imminent or occurring per Dragon manual escape flight rules. Launch control, you may proceed with arming the crew arm for movement.
Copy that. Proceeding to arm the crew arm for movement.
And we did just hear that call out that there is a go for a crew arm to retract, so we are going to be able to actually see that movement here on our screen here shortly.
Retraction has started.
So as you're watching that on your screen, we also got a call out for propellant load. This is a milestone that we're going to be following along throughout the next 44 minutes or so before launch, and we'll keep you apprised of updates as that moves on. And it continues to be an exciting time in human spaceflight, both for lunar missions and, of course, a little closer to home. Speaking of, let's get back to today's mission to the International Space Station and check in with Kate on the status of the countdown. Kate?
Thanks, Sandra. So we're now just about 44 minutes from launch. And as we heard moments ago, the SpaceX launch director has pulled the team for their readiness on both propellant loading and launch. This is basically the final roll call for the teams. Both the NASA teams checked in, the launch director, the mission director. Each team confirmed that they are healthy and ready to proceed. Now, that poll is performed electronically, so we didn't actually hear any call outs from each person, but it was all done electronically. Now, like we mentioned earlier, Falcon 9 and Dragon teams, along with key NASA launch personnel, are stationed at the Launch and Landing Control Center at SpaceX's Hangar X in Florida. The launch director also checked in with
Crew arm retraction is complete.
All right, good news there, letting us know that that crew access arm is now stowed into the launch position. That is one of the final physical changes that we'll see to the pad. Now, the launch director also checked in with the Dragon mission director, who we hear referred to as MD, as well as the NASA operations manager, to confirm alignment across SpaceX and NASA before moving forward. So Right now, the crew continues to be seated comfortably inside Dragon. That crew access arm has been stowed. Next up will be arming the launch escape system to prepare the spacecraft's emergency systems before departure. Once the launch director gives or what we saw before was the launch director giving the go-ahead for that crew access arm. And so up next will be that.
SpaceX, you have a go for step 6.3, close visors and arm launch escape system.
Dragon copies. We're ready to close visors and arm the launch escape system.
All right, words there letting us know that the crew is now putting their visors down, as we can see them doing. That's important as we move into more dynamic operations for the vehicles at the pad, and the launch escape system will be armed. After
SpaceX Dragon, visors are closed. We're ready to send the command.
SpaceX copies. You have a go to arm the launch escape system.
So arming the launch escape system.
Copy, go.
Is an important step that we execute prior to starting propellant loading. That will begin in less than 10 minutes. That'll happen at T-minus 35 minutes here in about 6 minutes from now. So in the meantime, let's check back in with our friends at Kennedy. Daryl and Doug, how is it over in Florida?
Beautiful here in Florida, Kate, and thank you. I'm here with Doug Wheelock, NASA astronaut, a.k.a. Wheels.
He's been giving us is verified armed.
Giving us the commentary, and we just heard a call out following up on what Kate was saying, that the launch escape system is armed. This is a very dynamic time as we prepare to load propellants aboard Falcon 9.
Absolutely. This is a critical time in the flow, of course, and we want to make sure that launch escape system is armed, so the crew has a way to swiftly get off the pad if need be.
And of course, you train for this, Wheels. This is not something that is, just an easy ride. I mean, if that thing were to need to pull off the top of that rocket, it's going to come up there with a lot of G-force.
You had mentioned, what is the time when the crew really starts to tighten up, and when that access arm swings away, then it starts to get real. It's game time now, and so things get a little less jovial inside, and people have their game face on, and they're getting ready to march through these sequences.
Talk us through kind of what you feel and experience in this moment. In your experience, you launched on STS-120, space shuttle, and then you also launched on a Soyuz from Kazakhstan. What's the experience? What's the mood inside the capsule, inside the spacecraft?
You could begin to see and hear and feel vibrations in the vehicle as valves open and close for tanking and things like that, gimbal checks and various pressurization of the Dracos on the side of the spacecraft as well.
Right there, close to your head, you can hear those.
So you could hear those things. You could feel vibration, and so you could feel sort of the spacecraft is coming to life. The rocket is coming to life, and so it gets real pretty quick.
Our next major milestone that we're awaiting is the loading of propellant, and this is happening at T-minus 35 minutes. This is standard for SpaceX. This is when they begin a automated sequence that will tank both the first stage and the second stage with propellants. They use RP1 as their main fuel, and of course liquid oxygen as the oxidizer. And once that starts kicking into gear, that sets forth that automated system that takes us all the way to T0.
Yes, you'll be able to see these are highly chilled propellants that will go into the rocket, and so you'll begin to see clouds forming around the rocket as it fills with fuel and propellant and oxidizer, and you'll be able to kind of tell how full the rocket is getting as it kind of marches up the stack. And so then you'll eventually see venting as well, and that's perfectly normal. That's the Dragon and the rocket Falcon 9 rocket coming to life.
And we can already see some of the venting of from the liquid oxygen tanks that are on the ground there as the wind swirls around. We've got great weather for launch today, 95% go from our launch weather officer, Brian Cizik, who is handling the mission weather-wise for today. And you're also looking at what is the new home for commercial crew launches, Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. This will be the designated place for all commercial crew launches to go from, unless there's something, the pad is needed for something else and there's a conflict. They could go back to pad 39A where commercial crew started.
Falcon 9 tanks will be venting for the start of propellant load. Expect loud venting.
There's some of the noises you were talking about,
sure.
and so they're saying, hey, beware. But just to finish the thought there, 39A, it'll serve as now a backup launch pad for commercial crew.
Absolutely. It's very exciting to bring these new pads to life, and we're getting very busy, and as Administrator Isaacman had said, it's a great time to be in the space business.
That's right.
Really wonderful to be here on the Space Coast and see these pads coming to life.
Crew-12 strapped inside Dragon Freedom, currently getting ready for its 5th flight, following Crew-4, Axiom 2 and 3, and Crew-9. It'll be riding on booster Falcon 9, of course, 1101-2, its 2nd flight. Previously, this booster flew on a Starlink flight not too long ago, Doug, and this is something that SpaceX, champions well in their program, and that's the reuse of their boosters.
It's so wonderful to see the reuse of these things. I heard them speak of they're trying to certify for 40 launches on these reusable pieces, which is just amazing. And just really the cost savings and also the reusability and just the time savings as well to turn around flights. It's really wonderful advancement in our technology.
And quick turnaround as well, as that mission was launched in January of this year. So just on the 4th of January, just a month and a half ago.
That's a pretty quick turnaround.
It's pretty fast.
Absolutely.
And we are counting down, it feels like pretty quickly, down to the kickoff of the propellant load, T-minus 35 minutes. We're just a few seconds away from listening in to this critical milestone on our countdown to liftoff at 5:15 and 55 seconds a.m. Eastern Time.
And the crew right now.
Load has started.
You heard the propellant load is starting. The crew is reviewing their procedures probably in their mind, their steps. We go through boundaries on ascent, and so they're no doubt reviewing those things in their mind as well to prepare for what they should hear, what they should feel, and then their actions if they don't see or hear those things.
Commander, that's right. Commander Jessica Meir walking her crew through those moments, no doubt, as she leads them on their mission to the International Space Station. Of course, she has a special place in our hearts as she was a co-commentator in your current role for Crew 7 and Crew 10. She was part of the launch broadcasts, and so she did those before she went up on the SpaceX Falcon 9 and Dragon. So she got to see all of this many times. Of course, she's well trained, but she also saw it from how it looks to the audience out there in the world.
And she set the bar way too high for me, Daryl. So
you're doing a fantastic job, Wheels. I couldn't be more happy to have you with me here today as we count down and head back out to Hawthorne, California.
Thanks, Daryl. Now, as we heard the call out earlier, propellant loading of both RP1, that's that rocket grade kerosene, as well as super chilled liquid oxygen, loading for those began at T-minus 35 minutes. Everything is looking good for both Falcon 9 and Dragon at the moment. Teams are working, no major issues. The range is green and weather is looking awesome. Our percent of violation of launch requirements for the weather Those are the rules that we have to follow in order to make sure that we're able to launch. We only have a 5% chance of violating those rules, so that's pretty good for Florida. Now, soon we'll hear the SpaceX launch director inform the crew when loading of cryogenic helium will begin. We'll first see that occur on stage 1 at T-minus 30 minutes, and then stage 2 will begin its cryogenic helium loading about 4 minutes later. Now, stage 2 RP loading should wrap up at T-minus 20 minutes and 30 seconds. And then as we approach T-minus 16 minutes and 30 seconds, we'll hear the call out that stage 2 liquid oxygen loading has begun. We do that as late as possible in the count to make sure that that liquid oxygen can stay as cold as possible. Now, by the time Falcon 9 is ready for liftoff, we will have loaded nearly 1 million pounds of propellant onto the vehicle. That's roughly the weight of a large commercial airliner at maximum takeoff weight. Today's mission has an instantaneous launch window, which means that there is 1 exact second when Falcon 9 must lift off to properly target the space station. That is different from many satellite missions where the launch window can last several minutes or hours and the spacecraft can adjust its orbit after launch. If a hold is called after this point, now that we've gotten into our propellant loading, we will have to scrub for today and target our next backup opportunity, which is most likely going to be Sunday around the same time. This is when the Earth's rotation will bring the launch site back into alignment with the station's orbit, while also having the correct weather rule following that we need. So for now, Jesse is going to preview West Coast recovery operations for us.
Thanks, Kate. Now we are at T-minus 31 minutes and counting and getting closer to getting our Crew-12 crew astronauts out into space. Now once the mission is complete and it's time for the crew to return back to Earth, Dragon will target...
Stage 1 cryo-helium loading.
Dragon will target one of several Pacific splashdown zones supported by SpaceX. Those splashdown locations are off the coast of California near Los Angeles, Oceanside, and San Diego. The recovery vessel Shannon is staged out of Long Beach and ready to support operations when Dragon returns. Having multiple recovery sites gives teams flexibility, increasing the chances of landing on the planned day and reducing the likelihood of waving off a return due to weather. So that's a look way into the future when our crew returns back to Earth, but let's rewind a bit to when we had a chance to hear Crew-12's thoughts about the spacecraft taking them up to space today.
Since Administrator Jared Isaacman took over at NASA, he's been giving special flights to employees who stand out in their area and are exceptional in many ways in his own F5. And so now joining us is one of those employees. He's with NASA's Steven Seislov, who is with the Ground and Missions Operation Manager Daniel Forrestel. Steven.
Hey, thank you, Daryl. We are here with Daniel Forrestel. He is the manager for ground operations and mission operations for Commercial Crew Program. And Daniel, one of your tasks, this is the second crewed launch from Space Launch Complex 40 over on Cape Side. One of your tasks was getting Space Launch 40 ready for human-rated missions. What went into that work?
Yeah, that's right. So SpaceX has been launching rockets from 40 for years before we man-rated it. And so we had to do a lot of hardware upgrades. We had to add a crew access tower, a crew access arm. We had to make sure we had emergency egress systems in place for the crew. And then not just the technical, we had to make sure that the operations were good. It looked similar launching from 39A and 40, but we had to make sure that the operations were seamless and that we had everything ready to go to get the crew up and down the tower and get the launch off.
Excellent. And while you were doing that for Crew-12, you also had to keep in the back of your mind that Artemis II was making its mission preparations for its flight around the moon. You share resources in different ways. Mm-hmm. What went into some of the work to deconflict the preparations for those and make sure everybody had the resources that they need?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something that we've been working on since really the end of last summer when we saw that their launch windows were lining up together. It's really unprecedented. We had never had a time with 2 manned rockets ready to go at the same time. And so just making sure that resources from propellants to people who support both launches to the astronaut crew quarters where we got the crews in quarantine together potentially. We had to take it step by step, make sure that we were ready to go. And we had to run different iterations depending on who went first and in what order and what timeline and how much time separated the two missions. It was a good problem to have. It was a complex problem, but one I hope that we get to do a lot here as the spaceport gets busier in the future.
Definitely.
Beginning stage 2 cryo-helium vent shortly, expect loud venting.
And as Daryl was suggesting, you were one of the first NASA employees to take a reward flight, a reward for the service that you've put in, the expertise that you provide, and you flew with Jared Isaacman, the NASA administrator, in his supersonic F-5s. What was that day like? I'd imagine you got a few jealous emails.
Oh yeah, it was incredible. I've gotten lucky enough to do a lot of really cool things here at NASA. Flying in a fighter jet was never on my list, but man, seeing Kennedy Space Center from the air was just a magnificent sight. And then they took us out over the water and we did acrobatics, and it was like a souped up roller coaster out there. And so it was just an incredible experience, was hanging on the whole time, and really honored to be able to be selected to do that, and hopefully something that a lot of people get the chance to do here in the future.
Excellent. Well, congratulations for that. We are going to head back to Daryl and the countdown for Crew-12.
All right, thank you, Stephen. And what Daniel didn't say, but he told me, is it took him a day to reorient himself because his vestibular system, right? You know this as a pilot.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
it is like a roller coaster, it could take a little bit to get your legs back underneath you.
Absolutely. Well, Crew-12 is getting ready to jump in full strength and dive into a full slate of science aboard the International Space Station. Here are just a few of the investigations they'll be working on. This is a compact system designed to produce intravenous saline from drinkable water. The goal, on-demand IV fluids for medical care, a critical capability for future long-duration missions far from Earth. And then there's VEG-06 that you see here. This research examines how spaceflight affects the relationship between plants and nitrogen-fixing microbes. What scientists learn here could help improve food production, not just in orbit, but also for future missions to the Moon and eventually Mars. And speaking of moon missions, over at nearby Launch Complex 39B, well, there it is. 4 astronauts are expected to lift off on NASA's Space Launch System rocket for a 10-day journey around the moon. Launch for Artemis II is currently scheduled for no earlier than March 6th. Launch window opens at 8:29 p.m. Eastern Time. Actually, we know this to be in early March. That date, of course, will depend on what happens with the latest wet dress. Last month, the Artemis II rocket made a major move, rolling from the Vehicle Assembly Building to Pad 39B for the first time. The 4.2-mile journey to the pad took about 12 hours as the moon rocket inched into position. There you see the Firing Room 1 and the team there conducting the operation. A few weeks ago, the teams conducted a wet dress rehearsal, a full practice countdown that loads the rocket with real cryogenic propellant, more than 700,000 gallons in all. The countdown moved through most of terminal count until a hydrogen leak around the 5-minute mark triggered a cutoff. The vehicle was safely detanked. The seals were replaced, those responsible for the leak, and another wet dress rehearsal will be scheduled soon. Orion will carry Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, and Christina Cook, along with Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen, around the moon and back. And Wheels, you are intimately involved with where this Artemis program is going, of course, and that is landing on the moon, as we're looking live at the rocket that will take those astronauts around the moon and in upcoming missions land on the moon. As we mentioned at the top of the broadcast, you're helping train the next generation of astronauts to be able to land on the moon. So what is going on? Talk about that challenge and where we're at right now.
So, of course, our mission back to the moon is going to require, we went back to the Apollo archives and we talked to several Apollo astronauts, Charlie Duke and Harrison Schmitt.
Wow.
The biggest help to our team so far, just trying to replicate what they did and build on that. So we're learning how to fly helicopters, and so we can do vertical landings and takeoffs. And so to kind of put that into the muscle memory of our pilots, we're also going to have motion-based simulation that will be lunar simulation. And then you'll be seeing coming on the near horizon a lunar lander training vehicle as well, a vehicle that can replicate lunar dynamics in flight. So we're very excited about our training strategy, getting back to the moon.
I love, and I'm jealous that you got to tap into the Apollo guys
Absolutely.
in order to help this. And there's a beautiful shot of the moon from our fine production crew here at the Kennedy Space Center that is manning all these beautiful views that you're looking at today, including there at Launch Complex 39B. For more Artemis II updates, just scan the QR code that is now at the bottom of your screen. It's going to take you to a website, which is nasa.gov/Artemis. You'll have all the updates and information that you need to see to understand the mission and follow it closely. All right now, let's send it back to SpaceX in Hawthorne, California for the latest update there.
Thanks, Daryl. And we did just hear that call out that RP1 on stage 2 is completely full. So great news. You're continuing to see some clouds of condensation build up around the rocket there. That is completely expected and normal as part of this fueling process. The Falcon 9 rocket supporting today's Crew-12 launch that you see on your screen right there is a 2-stage rocket designed for the reliable and safe transportation of satellites, cargo, and people, which is the goal of NASA's Commercial Crew Program. At the top of Falcon 9 today, the crew is sitting inside Dragon Freedom.
There are currently 5 Dragon spacecraft supporting human spaceflight missions. That's Endeavour, Resilience, Endurance, Freedom, and our 5th and final Dragon, Grace, which launched the Axiom Mission 4 in 2025. Designed with safety as the highest priority, Dragon is capable of carrying up to 7 passengers to and from Earth orbit.
And Dragon has 16 Draco thrusters that can be used in space to help navigate the spacecraft to its destination, each providing 90 pounds of force. That doesn't include the 8 Super Draco thrusters used for an abort, which are no longer active once the crew is in orbit.
To date, Dragon has been to orbit 55 times, including 49 trips to the International Space Station, both cargo and crew missions, and has completed 19 human spaceflight missions overall. Dragon is the first private spacecraft to take humans to the orbiting lab, having flown 300,000 pounds of cargo and more than 1,000 experiments to space, as well as 74 crew members representing 20 countries. Our versatile Dragon spacecraft can autonomously dock with the International Space Station when outfitted with a docking adapter, which is one of 3 Dragon configurations and how it's currently configured for today's flight.
Right now, Dragon is Falcon 9's, right below Dragon is Falcon 9's second stage, which houses a single Merlin vacuum engine, or MVAC engine. And then below the second stage is the black carbon fiber interstage, and inside of that is where the MVAC engine is located. The interstage connects the 2 stages and houses the center pusher that allows the first and second stage to separate during flight. Below that, we have the first stage, or booster, which when fully loaded holds about 1 million pounds of liquid oxygen and RP1. The first stage makes
Dragon,
up the...
SpaceX for update. Falcon 9, Dragon, and weather remain go. We're tracking no holds against launch today.
Dragon copies. That's great news.
And you just heard it there, a call to the crew inside Dragon Freedom that everything continues to progress well and look good for launch today, now 17 minutes and 19 seconds away. Now, the first stage makes up the bottom 2/3 of the vehicle and has 9 Merlin M1D engines at the bottom, which generate more than 1.7 million pounds of thrust.
Now, to reach orbit, the vehicle needs to go fast, hitting an orbital velocity of about 28,000 kilometers per hour just to keep from falling back to Earth. Now, that's fast enough to lap the Earth in about 90 minutes. About 2.5 minutes into flight, the first stage will separate and make its way back to Earth. Meanwhile, Dragon separates from the second stage and continues its roughly 34-hour journey to the space station. Now, it is early morning out there, but today's booster is heading back to our newest recovery.
Stage 2 LOX load is starting.
Our booster is heading back to our newest recovery site, our landing zone 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, which you can see the graphic there on the screen. It's highlighting the landing zone next to the pad there. This will be our first landing at this new site and the booster's second time returning back to Earth.
With T0 coming up in about 16 minutes, our teams are doing a series of system checks to ensure Dragon and Falcon 9 are ready. Let's check in with Kate on that countdown.
Thanks, Sandra. Overall, it's been a clean march to launch this morning, and we are still on track for an on-time launch. Now, the countdown is the framework that syncs all teams up, and we're monitoring lots of different factors as we get closer to liftoff. If everything goes as expected, we'll see Falcon take to the sky at 5:15 a.m. Eastern or 2:15 a.m. Pacific. And several minutes later, we'll see our very first Falcon 9 landing at LZ-40, our new landing zone located about 1,000 feet away from tonight's launch pad. Both Dragon and Falcon 9 continue to be healthy, and the teams continue to report no issues on either vehicle. Just moments there, we saw the crew sitting comfortably inside Dragon. Now, we wrapped up Stage 2 RP loading at T-minus 20 minutes, and Stage 2 liquid oxygen or LOX loading began just a couple minutes ago at T-minus 16 minutes and 30 seconds. Earlier, we heard the call out that the launch escape system was armed. That system is designed to propel Dragon away from Falcon 9 in the unlikely event of an emergency during launch. It simply provides a path to safety for the crew. The Eastern Range, which is monitoring keep-out zones among other key flight requirements, also continues to report no issues and are go to support today's launch. As for the weather, the thing we always monitor for our launches, we're tracking a 5% chance of launch weather constraints, otherwise known as 95% good for our target liftoff time. So all in all, we are go for launch this morning. So let's toss it back over to Anna for a status update from Houston.
Hey, thanks, Kate. Back here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, teams continue to work around the clock to monitor activities aboard the orbital outpost. Leading the team inside the room is Flight Director Garrett Hain, and the NASA team here in Mission Control Houston, the SpaceX team in Hawthorne, California, and the astronauts aboard the International Space Station will track the autonomous docking of Dragon Freedom when they enter what is known as joint operations. This will happen when the spacecraft enters what is known as the approach ellipsoid. The approach ellipsoid is an invisible boundary stretching 4 by 2 by 2 kilometers around the space station that helps us monitor all arriving and departing spacecraft. It is essentially the neighborhood of the space station. Once docked, crew members in both Dragon and aboard the space station will pressurize the area between the Dragon hatch and the space station hatch, known as the vestibule. They will then perform a series of leak checks and then work to open the hatches on both the space station and the Dragon. Once the hatches are open, Crew-12 will float into the station to begin their long-duration stay. Following today's launch, we are tracking a targeted docking at approximately 2:15 p.m. Central, 3:15 p.m. Eastern on Saturday, January 14th. About an hour and a half after docking, we do anticipate that the hatches will be opened, and when they enter the orbital outpost, Crew-12 will be greeted by the rest of their Expedition 74 crew and will come together for a brief welcoming ceremony. For now, that's all from us here in Mission Control Houston as the anticipation continues to build for a launch in just under 15 minutes. How's it looking on the Space Coast, Daryl?
It's looking great here. We're 95% go. We have beautiful clear skies and everything remains on track. No constraints as we enter the final 10 minutes. And Wheels, I want to turn to you now. As a former International Space Station commander, you know what it means to hand over a vehicle, a crew, and a station to the next generation of flyers. You also know that this crew, although they know the science they're working on, might end up working on some things they don't even know that they might encounter.
Sure, yeah. I flew with Shannon Walker. Who I believe is listening today.
Love Shannon.
And Shannon's awesome. She's a brilliant PhD scientist. I am not. And so I was doing some science. We were about 2 weeks into a 6-month mission. and I was working my science, and Shannon came to me. She said the potty's broken.
Oh.
And so we had a couple seconds of mini panic attack, and then she said, "If you fix the potty, I'll do all of your science for the rest of the day." I thought that is such a deal.
Is that a trade-off?
So it took me about 90 minutes, but we fixed that potty, and I found out that if you could fix the potty on a spaceship, you're guardian of the galaxy.
Wheels the Flummer to the rescue.
Absolutely.
Really quickly, we're going to hear some final words from Jessica Meir, the commander, before they lift off. She's got these words composed.
Perfect. Yeah, she's amazing.
We're looking forward to hearing that. And so with just about 11 minutes to go, we'll send it back to Hawthorne for the final steps of today's countdown.
Dragon, SpaceX, confirm crew displays are configured for launch.
Displays are configured for launch.
We copy. From the entire SpaceX team, it's been a pleasure working together. Good luck and Godspeed, Crew-12. Enjoy the ride.
In a few moments, we will leave the ground, but not the people who brought us here. This mission is the result of years of dedication, preparation, and trust. To the teams at NASA and SpaceX, Roscosmos, ESA, JAXA, and CSA, your work stands on this pad with us. Every test, every checklist, every decision has led to this moment. Thank you for your tireless dedication and attention to detail. We launch not as individuals, but as representatives of something much larger. We carry the flags of our countries and our space agencies, but most importantly, we carry humanity's intrinsic curiosity and desire to explore. Looking around me at the diversity of backgrounds and experiences with me in this cockpit and on the teams supporting us around the planet, it is clear that when we work together, we can accomplish extraordinary things. We stand on the shoulders of giants. This expression is trite, but true. Generations who dared to imagine beyond what they could touch, who turned risk into knowledge, and who left behind a foundation strong enough to push further. These giants also include our families, our friends, and loved ones. You share the weight of this journey in ways that few ever see and remind us that nobody reaches the horizon alone. When we look back at Earth from orbit, it will be your faces, your voices, and your sacrifices that travel with us. Crew-12 is ready. We are honored to represent our agencies, our nations, and the shared human desire to explore, to look up, to ask what lies beyond, and to go together. We carry this responsibility with humility and with awe. Over to Jack.
In human spaceflight, passion isn't a coincidence. It's a choice. Whether you're welding hardware, programming software, or piloting a spacecraft, every one of us chose the difficult path that got us here today in this moment. Interacting with such a dedicated team is the best part of my job, and I want to say a heartfelt thank you to the drive you bring to this program every single day. Over to Sophie.
Thanks, Jack. As a compliment to what my crewmates said, I wanted to say how important international cooperation is. As humanity, we can achieve great things when nations are working together. The International Space Station is a good example of a huge international achievement that just celebrated 25 years of continuous presence. We, as humanity, can be proud of us achieving this together. I'll hand it over to Andrey.
So guys, engage. Поехали.
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 And some incredible, beautiful, awe-inspiring words from our Crew-12 crew inside of Dragon Freedom, now approaching 7 minutes to liftoff. That was wonderful to hear.
Engine chill has started.
It will be about a 9-minute ride to orbit, which is around the time of second stage cutoff today. Dragon and the second stage will continue to coast for a few minutes after that, prior to separation. And on the ride uphill, we will hear a variety of call-outs on performance as we approach the in-orbit portion into the final countdown. We'll also hear some call-outs for various abort zones for both the first and second stage. So we'll be sharing more about those abort zones as we get closer. But just a quick check-in with our fueling here. RP1 is at 100% full. LOX is at 92%.
Stage 1, RP1 load is complete.
Oh, and that call out just right on time. Stage 1 is complete as well.
Yeah, the next milestone coming up will be at T-minus 5 minutes, and that'll be when Dragon will transition to configure for terminal count. That's basically when Dragon will go on internal power. And we're coming up on that milestone in about 30 seconds from now. And then following that milestone, we will begin to get ready for strong back or the transporter erector TE to recline away from the vehicle. And that'll begin just about 30 seconds after that T-minus 5 minute
Falcon
mark.
9 tanks will begin pressurizing for strong back retract.
Dragon is in configure for terminal count.
And there's that call out for Dragon configuring for terminal count, as well as we heard Falcon 9 propellant tanks pressurizing for that strong back retraction. So with the TE retraction, the clamp arms, which you can see on your screen, it's just below the Dragon vehicle there at the top of the second stage. Those will begin.
Strong back retract has started.
And now this process is going to begin. The clamp arms are going to open up. Once they are fully open, then the TE, which is that structure right next to the vehicle that you see on the right side, that'll begin to move slowly away from the vehicle. And there you can see on your screen that those clamp arms are starting to open up now. So it will reach full recline by T-minus 3 minutes and 40 seconds. And the TE rolls Falcon 9 out to the pad, raises it vertical, and stays connected through the final seconds before liftoff. It provides fuel, power, telemetry, and command connections between ground systems and the vehicle.
And the next major milestone that we are awaiting this morning is that Stage 1 LOX load is complete. Propellant is loaded late in the countdown, which is intentional because that colder propellant is denser, and denser propellants mean more performance out of the same tanks. The colder it is, the more mass you can move. Before any of that propellant flows, though, the plumbing and engines are chilled down. This prevents thermal shock and boil off when the ultra-cold liquid starts moving. You may hear that referred to as engine chill. Loading wraps in 2 steps. The first stage finishes around T-minus 3 minutes. We'll hear that call out here any second. And the second stage finishes about a minute later. And you are seeing those white clouds of vapor on...
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
Right on time, as expected. Stage 1 LOX load is complete. And you are seeing those white vapor clouds on your screen. This is normal and will continue as we do get closer to launch.
Yeah, and that call out was for...
Dragon is in terminal count and is on internal power.
That call out was for Stage 1 liquid oxygen loading completion, but Stage 2 is still actually loading that cold liquid oxygen, which will wrap up at the T-minus 2 minute mark in just about 25 seconds from now. Once liquid oxygen is complete, that'll mean that there is 1 million pounds of propellant loaded on Falcon 9, and that includes RP1, a highly refined kerosene, and liquid oxygen, which is super chilled to over 300 degrees below zero.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
And great call out. Stage 2 liquid oxygen loading is complete. That means that Falcon 9 is fully loaded with propellants.
Dragon is in auto idle.
Now gas close.
Gas closeouts will start in 5 seconds. Expect loud venting.
Great. Gas closeout has also begun just now, so we're isolating all the feed lines for the different gas systems from the Falcon 9 rocket. Those gases will then get vented overboard through umbilicals and the strong back. And actually, if you listen closely, you can hear some of that venting from the vehicle. Obviously, rockets are very loud, and sound can impart pressure loads back on the rocket itself. A ton of water absorbs and prevents the sound from hitting the structure and reverberating back onto the vehicle.
FTS is armed, and Falcon 9 is in startup.
And great
Dragon
call
is
out.
in countdown.
Dragon's flight computer is now in countdown and configured for launch. Now less than 1 minute away from the launch of Crew-12.
Dragon SpaceX, go for launch.
Great call out there. Go for launch. At the time of launch, space station.
Dragon, we are go for launch.
At the time of launch, space station will be flying 260 statute miles over the South Pacific Ocean east of New Zealand.
SpaceX is go, Crew is go. Let's watch as Falcon 9 takes Crew-12 out into space.
T-minus 15 seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition, and liftoff. Go Falcon, go Dragon, and Godspeed Crew-12.
And liftoff. Freedom flies bound for the International Space Station. 1.7 million pounds of thrust now propelling Falcon 9 and Crew-12. Vehicle is pitching downrange, and all 9 Merlin vehicles have lit. We're getting good call-outs on the first stage performance and propulsion so far.
T plus 30 seconds into the Crew-12 mission on board Dragon and Falcon 9. The vehicle is going to throttle down in preparation for max Q. That's the largest structural load that the vehicle will see on ascent.
Power and telemetry nominal.
Good call outs there.
Stage 1 throttle down.
There's that call out for stage 1 throttle down. Pass through max Q in a few seconds here.
Max Q.
Great news. We have passed through max Q.
Vehicle is supersonic.
That call out that the vehicle is supersonic means it's traveling faster than the speed of sound.
Stage 1 throttle up.
Stage 1 now throttling up.
1 Bravo.
That call out for 1 Bravo
Copy, 1
means
Bravo.
we're in the second and final abort mode for the first stage, continuing to get good performance. The crew is now already pulling over 2 Gs. Next up, we'll have a couple events
Stage 2 engine chill.
happening in rapid succession. First is that engine chill on the second stage MVAC engine, and then we'll have MECO, or main engine cutoff, where the 9 engines on the first stage will cut off ahead of the first and second stages, separating from one another. Then the single Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will ignite, continuing to carry Crew-12 to orbit, while the first stage begins its journey back to Earth.
The 9 Merlin engines are starting to throttle down and standing by for MECO, or main engine cutoff.
Stage 1 throttle down.
There's that call out. And in just a few seconds here, we will have MECO stage separation, stage 1 flip maneuver for the booster to make its way back to Earth, SES-1, and the start of the boost back burn.
MECO.
2 Alpha.
Copy, 2 Alpha.
Stage separation confirmed. And back ignition.
And incredible views. We've had MECO stage separation. You can see that booster coming back down to Earth, and that MVAC engine has ignited, which you can see clearly there on your screen. And the Dragon spacecraft with Crew-12 is still attached to the Falcon 9 second stage. The next milestone that we have coming up will be the start of the Stage 1 boost back burn. And that burn is the first of 3 burns that Stage 1 has to help it return back to Earth.
We are now 3 minutes and 30 seconds into today's flight of Crew-12. The second stage of the Lone Merlin engine has lit and continues to burn, as you can see on your screen. Stage 2 continues to be performing well with a good trajectory and will continue firing until we reach about 8 minutes into today's flight. And we're getting our first
Dragon,
view.
SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Getting good call-outs of the trajectory as well as our first views of the crew inside Freedom. A few minutes remaining in this burn before a couple of these astronauts will experience weightlessness for the first time. The crew's G-load did dip right when we hit that MECO or main engine cutoff event, and now it's going to continue to build up again until the second stage shuts down. Everything's still continuing to go well. Now 4 minutes and 45 seconds into today's launch of Crew-12.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Second stage will continue to fire until close to 9 minutes into the flight, which will accelerate Dragon to more than 17,000 miles per hour and place our crew in orbit. This Merlin vacuum engine can produce over 220,000 pounds of thrust in the vacuum of space.
Meanwhile, the first stage booster is now on its way back to landing zone 40. Stage 1 is coasting, has already coasted to apogee, and the grid fins are helping to guide it back to Earth. And we've already had the boost back burn, so the next event coming up will be the entry burn. That will be 3 of those 9 M1D engines reigniting, and that helps slow the vehicle down as it's re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. Once that entry burn concludes, we use the
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
We use the drag from the atmosphere to help slow the vehicle down until landing.
Dragon copy.
And that entry burn is coming up in just about 20 seconds from now. Falcon 9 does have a heat shield that is designed to protect the engines in the vehicle from that combined thermal and aerodynamic loading during max entry Q, which is the moment of max stress on the vehicle during entry.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
And you've heard that call out. The entry burn has begun.
Stage 1 entry burn shut down.
And the entry burn has concluded for the first stage vehicle. 2 of 3 burns done. Next up will be the landing burn for the first stage.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
And everything.
Dragon copy.
Everything continuing to be nominal. We're about 20 seconds away or so from that landing burn starting up on the first stage. It'll be a single center E9 engine that ignites.
Stage 1 transonic.
And helps slow the vehicle down just in time to touch down for landing at our newest landing zone 40.
We have just a couple minutes.
Stage 2 FTS has saved.
And landing burn has begun. Let's watch as Falcon 9 touches down.
Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And what an excellent view of Falcon 9 touching down for the very first time at landing zone 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station.
Congratulations. That is so exciting to see. And on your screen, you also have a great view of the second stage continuing to fire. That burn is going to last for just about another minute. And then we'll have SECO, or second engine cutoff, which will occur where the lone Merlin vacuum engine cuts off and stops firing.
Stage 2 is in terminal guidance.
Once that happens, the second stage will continue to coast for about 3 minutes while still attached to Dragon, until Dragon is then commanded to separate. At this point, Dragon will be flying free with Crew-12 on board and in Earth's orbit.
Shannon.
Copy, Shannon.
And that call out for Shannon refers to Shannon, Ireland, and is our final abort zone in the second stage. Continuing to get good performance. After this second
Stage 2
stage,
shutdown.
there we had that call out for SECO and engine shutdown.
Dragon, SpaceX, we have a nominal orbit insertion.
That is great news.
Dragon copies, nominal insertion. Wonderful ride.
Hearing good call-outs following
Launch
second
escape
stage.
system disarmed.
You heard that call-out that the crew is in a nominal or as expected orbit. So again, we're going to continue to coast for a few minutes after SECO to allow those rates and motion from the burn to settle out. There are some small reaction thrusters on the upper part of the second stage that can be used to counteract any residual motion, basically making sure that we're in a stable coast before Dragon separates from Falcon, which will happen, as you see on your screen, right on time. Dragon now flying free.
Dragon separation confirmed.
Dragon copies.
What a great view with the Crew-12 crew on board Dragon Freedom, separating from Falcon 9's second stage.
Dragon Freedom, Chief Engineer, Jessica, Jack, Sophie, Andrey, welcome to orbit. On behalf of the entire Falcon team, we thank you for flying with Falcon 9. Dragon will take you from here. Over to our launch director for a few words.
It turns out Friday the 13th is a very lucky day. Jessica, Jack, Sophie, Andrey, it's been a pleasure training with you and preparing for your flight. From the entire Falcon launch team, thank you, good luck, and Godspeed to the crew of Freedom.
Thank you, team. That was quite a ride. Thank you, SpaceX, Falcon 9, and NASA teams. We have left the Earth, but the Earth has not left us. When we gaze at our planet from above, it is immediately clear that everything is interconnected. The vast oceans, the continuous land masses, and all that they contain. We are one humankind here on our shared home planet. This becomes self-evident as astronauts peering down from above, and is a sentiment that would serve us all well to remember back on the ground. We see the thin, tenuous band of an atmosphere solely responsible for supporting all life on this planet, and we know that it is utterly unique, fragile, and must be protected. To those supporting and watching our journey, please know that your spirit travels with us, stitched into the very fabric of all that we do. We hope that our arrival in space reminds all of you that dreams truly can become reality, given dedication, perseverance, and yes, a bit of luck along the way. Crew-12 is grateful and ready for the journey ahead. We're on our way. Andrey?
Центр управления, экипаж, Dragon Freedom на связи. Мы на целевой орбите. Все системы работают штатно. С этой высоты наша Земля выглядит невероятно хрупкой и целостной. Здесь не видно границ, только тонкая голубая линия атмосферы, которая защищает все живое. Именно этот вид напоминает нам о главном. Мы одна команда на одном корабле в планете Земля. Каждый виток вокруг нашей общей голубой колыбели – это доказательство того, что возможно, когда наши нации объединяют знания. Сегодня наш экипаж и эта станция – это результат работы тысяч специалистов из разных стран. Мы здесь не как представители отдельных государств, а как человечество, которое исследует космос, чтобы лучше понимать и дом. Мы продолжим работу на благо всех. Спасибо за доверие и поддержку. Dragon, Freedom, связь с вами.
Thanks to the flight control, engineering, manufacturing, and ground support teams around the world. Successful launches of humans to orbit is a testament to your technical mastery and relentless precision in this unforgiving environment. We fly with confidence because we know that the finest minds on Earth are watching our backs. And I'll pass it over to Sophie.
Thanks, Jack. For Crew-12, this is our first orbit. For humanity, it's just one small moment in the vast journey of exploring our world and beyond. From up here, we're reminded that we're all connected. Take care of one another, dream big together, and keep reaching higher. That's how humanity moves forward and how we make each other proud.
We copy and appreciate those words, Crew-12. We saw nominal dehumidifier activation and service section Draco checkouts. Nosecone deploy continues nominally as well.
And with
We copy all. Thanks, Mary.
With those words from our 4 Crew-12 astronauts, the crew is now well on their way to the International Space Station. That is, of course, their destination where they will be docking tomorrow. You also heard a call out that the nose cone was underway for deploying. The hooks are driving to open up that nose cone. It's going to remain open all the way through the journey uphill, as well as once Freedom docks to the International Space Station, and will remain open throughout the mission and will close once the crew does depart about 9 months from now after their science and research mission. So it was wonderful to see Crew-12's launch today. Congratulations to the NASA team, the SpaceX team, and of course to Crew-12. It's great to see you on orbit.
Yeah, again, we did get confirmation that the nose cone deploy is underway. The 6 hooks that hold the nose cone in place during the launch and ascent portions have to retract, and then the nose cone will be able to start to swing open and deploy. This uncovers a number of critical systems for the flight up to the space station, including the forward bulkhead thrusters and the docking hatch. And the call from the core here in Hawthorne indicated that we did have good checkouts of the 12 Draco thrusters around the service section. 4 to go after we get the nose cone open and the ECLIS, the environmental control and life support system, activated inside Dragon. And we've got a view here seeing that the nose cone, this is from the forward bulkhead section of Dragon, this nose cone is opening up, and that's what you're seeing on your screen. It's about 30% open at this moment. Soon the crew will be able to get their visors open and get out of their suits and settle in for the ride to the space station. And again, this does take a few minutes for the nose cone to fully open. It's a pretty slow and steady process, but it is underway.
And it has been an exciting and jam-packed series of events following the liftoff of Crew-12 at 2:15 a.m. Pacific time today. Crew-12 is comprised of NASA astronauts Jessica Meir, Jack Hathaway, as well as ESA, or European Space Agency astronaut Sophie Adenot, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrey Fedyaev. They are now safely in orbit following an approximately 9-minute ride after a liftoff from Space Launch Complex 40 in Florida. The crew now has a 34-hour journey before they reach their destination, the International Space Station. Docking is targeted for February 14th at 3:15 p.m. Eastern, 12:15 p.m. Pacific to the space-facing port of the station's Harmony module. Between now and then, Dragon will perform a series of burns as it catches up to the space station, and that first burn will be a phase burn, which will occur about 30 minutes from now.
Human spaceflight has come so far in the last 6 years with Dragon. In addition to flying people, SpaceX's Dragon spacecraft also enables researchers the opportunity to fly critical science to orbit. So far, SpaceX and Dragon have carried more than 1,000 research experiments to and from low Earth orbit, both to the International Space Station and on our free flyer missions. From DNA sequencing to 3D printing studies enabled by Dragon and the space station test a variety of technologies, systems, and materials that will be needed for future long-duration exploration missions. Every mission yields critical research and learnings that help make life both on Earth and in space better. And flights like today's help us continue to lay this foundation for our future among the stars and continue our mission to make life multiplanetary. Now, we'll be signing off from SpaceX for now, so we're going to send it back over to Kennedy Space Center. But before we go, we want to thank NASA for entrusting us with today's mission and thank all of you for being with us today.
Absolutely, Jesse. And we did just get confirmation as well that the nose cone is 100% open and opened as expected. So that was the last major milestone that we were tracking from here on our end. But I do want to say thank you to SpaceX as well for everything that you do and all of you who tuned in as well to support today's launch. We are going to say goodbye from here in Hawthorne until we pick back up coverage for docking beginning at 1:15 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, February 14th, for targeting docking to the space.
Dragon, SpaceX, we saw a nominal nose cone opening, TCS, and forward bulkhead Draco checkouts.
Dragon copies.
And again, that confirmation that nose cone is
and with
fully
that, Dragon,
open.
There are 5 minutes remaining in our current ground station pass. At this time, you are welcome to introduce your zero-G indicator.
Our microgravity indicator consists of 4 satellites orbiting a crocheted Earth, all handmade elements by Jack Stoddard and my childhood best friend. Each crew member selected a personal symbol or satellite. A tether links each satellite to the Earth, representing our connection to our families, friends, and our one shared home. I chose a panda holding a mushroom, 2 adorable symbols of environmental importance and cultural fascination. Pandas are modern icons of species preservation and international diplomacy, and a pivotal character in my childhood. Mushrooms, the fungi, are the great decomposers, with all life on Earth depending on them to keep our soils healthy and food webs functioning.
I chose a moon that my daughter hand crocheted. Each color woven into the design represents a member of our family or cherished shared activity. By bringing this piece with me, I keep our bond close, allowing me to relive happy memories while looking forward to the ones we'll create when I return.
Bananas are the world's most common fruit, ordinary fruit shared by billions of people across every continent. Yet, on orbit, fresh fruit is rare, so I wanted a playful reminder of kitchens and homes, a familiar piece of Earth drifting weightless with us.
Я выбрал свою часть, потому что именно эта штуковина напоминает мне об одном из художественных фильмов времен еще Советского Союза, который я смотрел в детстве. И я на самом деле предлагаю попробовать вам угадать, что это за фильм. Буду рад где-нибудь от вас это услышать.
And we present to you Planet Gaia and her moons, floating here in Crew-12's Dragon.
And with that, we had again...
We copy Dragon, and with that, I can let you know that we had nominal GNC checkouts. Our next burn is our phasing burn per your forward view.
Dragon copies will be monitoring.
A little bit of a description about the Crew-12 zero-G indicator that they selected called Planet Gaia. They each shared some great words about what they contributed as part of that zero-G indicator to let them know that they are officially in the microgravity environment of space. So that was so cool to hear what they each had to say and how they are bringing a piece of Earth back with them and something that's meaningful to them. So Crew-12 is successfully in orbit, and we are targeting a docking tomorrow on the space-facing port of the Harmony module at 3:15 p.m. Eastern. So for now, thank you for joining us here in Hawthorne. We're going to toss it back over to Daryl and Doug at the Kennedy Space Center to wrap up today's coverage.
Welcome back to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. I'm Daryl Nail here with ESA astronaut Claudie Haigneré. So good to have you here. Thank you for doing this interview post-flight. The significance of Claudie being here is tremendous. You were the inspiration for ESA astronaut Sophie Adenot, who at age 14 watched you fly as the first French woman to go into space back in 1996. That inspired her on her journey when she said something clicked and she knew she wanted to be an astronaut. You just witnessed your protege take that inspiration from you and fly into space. And I'm wondering what you felt, what you experienced in that moment.
I'm really pleased to be with you. I thought it would have been a quiet joy with pride for Sophie, but it was so hugely emotional to see her with this successful launch. No, I'm really happy because I know that sometimes girls or boys need some turning point in order to make their dream come alive. And if I have been this one for Sophie, to see today the brightness of the past, that's wonderful.
Incredible. And she shared, Sophie did, during her press conference, that you wrote her a letter before she went to go on this launch. Would you share some of the words that you gave, that you hand wrote to her?
No, the letter was for Sophie.
Okay, understood.
Maybe she has a letter in her pocket. No, it was not advices, because I think everyone has his own path to come with a dream. It was mainly experiences, lesson learned, in order to say, don't forget that, or be careful with, and the flight will be long, so take everything for you and enjoy.
Great advice, great advice. As this mission unfolds, and it will be a long one, up to 8 months, how will you be experiencing or keeping track of this mission as she does the science and does the work that she's going to do aboard the ISS?
I'm hugely grateful to the teams that support the experiment and all the work on board. I do remember 30 years when I flew with a Soyuz on the Mir station, who had almost no communication with the ground, but now there is 99% of communication with real-time transfer of data, and it will be possible for her to be close to the family, close to the friends, and close to the teams for the experiments. So we will have some way to discuss and to exchange.
If you had any words that you could say to her now after watching her take off into space, what would you say?
Godspeed, but it's already done. Say enjoy. Say maybe to the crew that they will meet on board a big hello, because that's international collaboration and cooperation. This is wonderful. And then be careful with your program, scientific program, because you are here for that. And enjoy, and please share with us. We need this transmission for inspiration for the young generation.
What you did for her, she can help pay it forward
completely.
To the next generation.
Brilliant.
And as it was on the license plate on her vehicle, bon vol. Right. Have
Bon
a good
vol.
flight. I don't know if I said it right.
Have a good flight. Bon
Have
vol.
a good flight. Yeah. Claudie Haigneré, ESA astronaut and first woman from the country of France to go into space. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your thoughts on the second woman to go to space.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to turn our attention now to the International Space Station, where Crew-12 will join Expedition 74 and head over to NASA's Stephen Sisloff, who's joined by International Space Station Program Chief Scientist Jennifer Buckley. Stephen?
Thank you, Daryl. We are here with another inspiring person. This is Jennifer Buckley, the Chief Scientist for the International Space Station program. And Jennifer, the crew that's going up there on Crew-12, they're going to perform dozens of experiments during this long-duration mission. One of them is turning potable water into IV fluid. How does that help future explorers?
That's right. Out of about the 250 experiments this crew will perform, one of them is IV Gen Mini. So this is building off of some research we've already done on ISS, learning how to make IV fluid bags real time on orbit. So commercially, those off the shelf only last about 16 months. So it's really important as we step out into the solar system to explore that we're able to support the crew medically. And so we're going to be doing a tech demo on board.
Outstanding. Now, Artemis II, that's lifting off in a few weeks. They've, of course, been informed by a lot of the research that's taken place on station. What are some of those ties between space station research and what the Artemis II crew is going to be doing?
You know, space station is a perfect proving ground for exploration, both to the moon and Mars. So for the vehicle itself, a lot of the life support systems are informed by the research that we've done on ISS, proving out those systems, everything from their onboard toilet to their water-based fire extinguisher to help keep the crew safe, inform how we do space flight safely as we go farther.
Excellent. And when you're looking at Artemis III, the mission coming up that'll land astronauts on the moon, how is the space station research that's taking place now helping with that mission?
Space station research, not only do we have the astronauts do research, but they also are subjects themselves. So we've learned a lot about astronaut health through the time of International Space Station. We also, on Artemis II, are flying tissue chips with crew cells on them. So this is really neat. It's a program we started on the International Space Station. So we're going to be taking a look at the effects of crew members as they leave low Earth orbit. And then finally, you know, those beautiful views of Earth that we see from the International Space Station are also really science. And so all of the imagery and technology that we've developed from that are going to help us take imagery and analyze the surface of the moon as well.
Outstanding, outstanding. Thank you so much for being here this morning, Jennifer. And Daryl, we will go back to you and Doug and looking at how bright the future looks thanks to all this science taking place.
Absolutely, Stephen, and thank you very much to you and Jennifer Buckley for her interview. Well, we had some social media questions that we weren't quite able to get to, but Wheels has promised me he wants to answer them. So we're going to get those questions to him, and then he's going to post the answers on his X account, Astro Wheels. So thank you for following through on that.
Absolutely. It's actually Astro_Wheels. Okay,
Good note.
so I'll meet you there.
On X. Thank you very much. We appreciate that, Wheels.
Absolutely.
Well, that is going to do it for today's launch coverage, but of course, Crew-12's journey is just getting started. After the beautiful liftoff from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station and a successful trip to orbit, the crew is now on their way, catching up to the International Space Station. Docking is targeted for Saturday at 3:15 p.m. Eastern Time. NASA Plus coverage begins at 1:15 p.m. Eastern Time. And so, Doug, as they get ready to dock with the International Space Station, the excitement of being in space for the first time will be this first 1 day and 10 hours. And then they'll get to work when they get into the space station.
Absolutely. And actually, the approach to the rendezvous and docking with the space station, when you first pick up the space station in the windows, it's like, wow. It's like a castle in the sky, you know. It's just quite amazing as you approach the station. It took my breath away seeing how large it was. It's how magnificent it looked in the sky.
And one of the things they'll be seeing, what we've been seeing from the X accounts of the astronauts and the International Space Station, is the solar activity is so high. Have you been seeing some of the northern lights that come from space? Incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. Follow these astronauts that are on board, and they're going to be taking some incredible imagery of the lights at the poles. So the northern lights and the southern lights as well.
And they're beautiful on the ground, as we know, but up in space, the red-topped part of those green ribboned waves, it's so crystal clear. It's beautiful. As he said, make sure you check out those X accounts.
Absolutely. And on the space station, it looks like rain, like green and red rain, and it lights up the underneath of the space station is glowing red and green from the lights. It's just quite amazing.
That is
the Aurora, yeah.
That is a wow factor like no other. All right. Well, thank you very much, Wheels. You can follow along with Crew-12's journey to the station by listening in on real-time mission audio, the same operational comms used by the flight controllers. Just scan that QR code that you see at the bottom of your screen. You can use your phone, take a screenshot of it, and tune in later on. We'll pick back up with live broadcast coverage about 2 hours before docking right here on NASA Plus. Wheels, thank you so much for sharing this moment for us, for all your incredible stories and information and guiding us through today's launch coverage. We greatly appreciate it.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
We look forward to hearing more about your work on the human landing system and getting to the moon.
Absolutely. Stay tuned.
You're going to hear more from Wheels. So to all of our guests and our teams at NASA and SpaceX, our production team, for the great job they did today, and to you watching around the world, thank you so much for being part of today's launch. From launch pad to low Earth orbit, we're going to take a look now, going all the way back to the beginning, the moments from suit up to orbit. Have a great morning, everyone.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining our ongoing coverage of the NASA SpaceX Crew-12 mission. I'm Jessie Anderson, a Senior Production and Engineering Manager here at SpaceX, and I'm joined by Sandra Jones with NASA Communications. We are just under a couple hours away from the final approach and docking of Dragon to the International Space Station. This will be Dragon's 50th visit to the space station, both cargo and crew missions, and its 20th human spaceflight overall.
Looking back over the last 30-plus hours, launch day preparation started yesterday for our crew members. About 4 hours prior to launch, the crew completed their final medical checks before joining the SpaceX team to get into their spacesuits. After suit up in the NASA Operations and Checkout building, the crew walked out, waving some final farewells to their family and friends waiting outside. The next destination for the crew was the launch pad. It was a short ride to Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, where the Falcon 9 and Dragon spacecraft were waiting for them. 2.5 hours prior to launch, the crew ingressed or entered Dragon, walking over the crew access arm and enjoying some last views of the Space Coast, heading into the White Room and into the spacecraft.
At 2:15 a.m. Pacific Time or 5:15 a.m. Eastern, the 9 Merlin 1D engines ignited and Falcon 9 lifted off from Space Launch Complex 40, beginning Crew-12's journey to the International Space Station. Following stage separation, the first stage booster supporting the mission performed a boost-back burn to bring itself back to the launch site, where it landed at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station on landing zone 40. A couple minutes after that, we had a good orbit insertion of Dragon, followed by a few minutes later by spacecraft separation. And we are currently waiting for the approach initiation burn coming up as our next milestone. But there have been a few burns already that have brought Crew-12 to where they are currently in their journey at this moment.
About 45 minutes after liftoff, Dragon executed the first major burn, known as the phase burn, which is performed at the first apogee, or the highest point of the initial orbit, and raises Dragon's perigee, or lowest point, to a higher altitude. This was the first of 5 major burns using the Draco thrusters required to raise Dragon's orbit and position it for approach to the International Space Station.
Then earlier today, that sequence of rendezvous and phasing burns continued as Dragon executed the boost burn at 4:13 a.m. Pacific Time, 7:13 a.m. Eastern. The boost burn put the crew in an orbit where Dragon's apogee, or the highest point of the orbit, was 10 kilometers lower than the station. But raising only the apogee of Dragon's orbit isn't enough for a rendezvous where we want to dock. Before we can approach the station, we need Dragon's entire orbit, not just that highest point, to be effectively shadowing the space station.
We have you loud and clear as well. Houston, Dragon on the big loop. How do you read?
Dragon, this is Houston. Good day. Hope you guys are well. Have you loud and clear.
We have you the same. Station, Dragon on the big loop. How do you hear?
It is great to hear your voice. I hear you loud and clear, and I see you from the cupola.
We've got you loud and clear as well, Chris. We were incredibly excited to see the ISS through our docking port window before we even started getting seated, so can't wait to see you, buddy.
You too. Really looking forward to seeing you guys here.
Those were some comms between the Crew-12 crew and the folks on board the International Space Station, as well as the core, which we were seeing there in mission control. Dragon executed the close burn at 4:59 a.m. Pacific time, 7:59 a.m. Eastern, which was about a half an orbit after its boost burn.
The close burn placed Dragon on an orbit roughly co-elliptical with the space station, meaning it was maintaining an orbit roughly 10 kilometers lower than the space station the entire way around the Earth. And again, that's in contrast to only being 10 kilometers lower than the station during Dragon's apogee, or the highest point in its orbit, which is achieved by the boost burn beforehand. Hours later, at 6:41 a.m. Pacific, 9:41 a.m. Eastern, Dragon executed the fourth major burn, known as the transfer burn. This is where Dragon raises its apogee, or highest point of its orbit, to just 2.5 kilometers lower than the space station.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Ground is go for approach initiation and has enabled the maneuver. Expected maneuver start time is approximately 1833.
I'm 833 for AI.
Again, seeing the core there on your screen, communicating with the Crew-12 crew. Dragon then rounded everything out with a final co-elliptic burn at 7:27 a.m. Pacific, 10:27 a.m. Eastern Time to once again maintain a constant orbit lower than the station, this time just 2.5 kilometers below. This was a shorter burn lasting about 41 seconds. And then after that, Dragon performed a out-of-plane burn to fully align its orbital track to match that of the space station's. That burn took place at 9:59 a.m. Pacific, 12:59 p.m. Eastern Time.
As we enter the approach phase, SpaceX flight controllers will work in tandem with the NASA team in Houston to maneuver Dragon to the proper attitude. They will initialize the navigation sensors used for the methodical approach to space station, and they'll also activate and test out a number of systems on Dragon, including bidirectional communications with the station using the C2V2 system. C2V2 stands for Common Communications for Visiting Vehicles, and it sets up a data stream from Dragon to the station, giving another path for Dragon telemetry to come to the ground, and gives additional command capability to astronauts aboard the station.
Looking a little ahead at approximately 10:39 a.m. Pacific, 1:39 p.m. Eastern Time, Dragon's Draco thrusters will fire for the approach initiation burn. This will take place when Dragon is about 2.5 kilometers below station and about 7 kilometers behind it. The approach initiation burn will bring Dragon about 400 meters or a quarter of a mile directly below the station. A small approach initiation mid-course burn is planned for about 25 minutes later. These maneuvers will also move Dragon inside one of two checkpoints around the station that requires a set of go-no-go poles with the different control teams. First checkpoint is called the approach ellipsoid, or as you might hear it called, the AE. The approach ellipsoid is an imaginary shape measuring 4 by 2 by 2 kilometers, and it's essentially a large three-dimensional oval. Before controllers given Before controllers given Dragon permission to move inside the approach ellipsoid, the spacecraft will be on what is known a 24-hour safe trajectory. This means that if Dragon lost all control to its thrusters, it would be at least 24 hours before its trajectory would move inside that approach ellipsoid.
Once Dragon arrives at 400 meters below station, it will be at what is known as Waypoint Zero, and that will be the first checkpoint during our approach. The spacecraft can hold here at 400 meters, but if all of its systems check out, Dragon can continue its approach to Waypoint 1. Dragon's move from Waypoint 0 to Waypoint 1 will swing it up and over top of the station, arriving at a distance of approximately 220 meters. At this point, it will be on what we call the docking axis, which essentially means it is directly in front of the space-facing docking port on the space station's Harmony module. Just before arriving at Waypoint 0,
SpaceX Dragon on Dragon to ground. We're in 4.010, reporting successful intercom checks in step 5.2.
SpaceX copies. Good intercom checks. That's complete with 5.2.
And those communications up to NASA astronaut Chris Williams, who is going to be prime for docking today. We are targeting an approach initiation burn at 10:33 a.m. Pacific, so now just about 9 minutes from now. But before that, crew has to arrive at Waypoint 0, and before they arrive at Waypoint 0, the NASA and SpaceX teams will conduct a go-no-go poll for Dragon to move inside the keep-out sphere, which is another checkpoint that consists of an imaginary sphere around station with a radius of 200 meters. Flight controllers use this to monitor all arriving and departing vehicles, and this is another chance to confirm all of the guidance, navigation, and control systems are working correctly on Dragon before moving closer to station. It carries a similar...
SpaceX Dragon on Dragon to ground. We are complete with 4.010 and proceeding to 4.011.
SpaceX copies. 4.010 is complete. You are go to open 4.011 and hold in 1.1. We will follow up on this procedure after approach initiation.
We will...
Dragon copies. We are holding on step 1 of 4.011.
We will continue to hear communications from the ground up to the crew on space station, as well inside Dragon, Freedom, leading up to their docking as well as after. So we will pause when we hear those communications and relay what we're hearing on the loops to you all. But just jumping back into today's operations, a similar requirement is required on the orbital trajectory that if Dragon were to somehow lose control of all of its thrusters, and it and the space station would both be safe for 4 orbits, or about 6 hours, rather than that 24 hours required to enter the approach ellipsoid.
And once Dragon has approval to move inside the keep-out sphere, it will move from Waypoint 1 in toward Waypoint 2, which is just 20 meters away from station. Once Dragon is only 20 meters away at Waypoint 2, the spacecraft focuses on aligning its docking system with the International Docking Adapter. And we may hear the call-out CHOP, which stands for Crew Hands-Off Point. This happens a little less than 30 seconds before docking, when Dragon is just a few meters from the docking port. At this point, any aborts will have to be done automatically by Dragon. And the grand arrival, when our crew arrives at the space station, Dragon will fly in and make contact with the IDA, or the International Docking Adapter, giving us what we call a soft capture. The soft capture ring then retracts until sensors indicate it's time for 12 hooks to drive in place to give us a hard capture and firmly secure Dragon to its new home on the space station.
Once hard capture is confirmed, the space station crew, namely NASA astronaut Chris Williams, will manually pressurize the vestibule, or the area between the Dragon hatch and the space station hatch. Meanwhile, umbilicals that provide power, audio, and data connections from the station to Dragon are put in place. Then it's time for leak checks and hatch opening, which is currently timelined to come a little more than 2 hours following docking. Now, we did hear some communications back and forth on what is referred to as the big loop. And now that the big loop is configured, it is essentially, as the name suggests, one large loop between the crew on the International Space Station, the crew on Dragon Freedom approaching for docking, as well as ground control teams, both in Mission Control Houston, as well as here in Hawthorne. And it just creates a singular point for them all to communicate with each other and make sure that they're on track leading up to docking today, targeted for 12:12 p.m. Pacific time.
And we are a little bit ahead of schedule, so that approach initiation burn is actually coming up in just less than 5 minutes at 10:33 a.m. Pacific time. So just a few minutes away from that approach initiation burn, as we've been talking about.
And on your screen there on the right is Mission Control Houston in Houston, Texas. The team there is going to continue to monitor operations this morning on a variety of consoles. Of course, we have the flight director who oversees the entire room, but there are other flight controllers, including VVO or the visiting vehicle officer, who will help monitor Dragon systems alongside the team here in Hawthorne. We also have Cronus, who is responsible for the cameras outside Space Station. So hopefully we'll be able to get some great views of Dragon approaching as it gets a little bit closer to the International Space Station. Dragon is now about 8,700 meters away from the space station, so still a bit away, but of course that will get smaller and smaller as we target an on-time docking today at 12:12 p.m. Pacific.
And the Crew-12 crew has been coasting along in Dragon for about 32 hours or so now. And during their coast phase all the way to the International Space Station, they actually don't need to be in their suits, so they were able to relax outside of their suits. But right now, they are suited up. They are strapped in and harnessed into their seats. They do need to wear their suits for the docking portion of their flight. And this is just to make sure that they have the protection of the suits in the off-nominal case of a cabin depressurization. And there you can see on your screen, this is a view from the International Space Station looking at that tiny dot, which is Dragon Freedom with Crew-12 on board.
And Crew-12 is comprised of 2 NASA astronauts, an ESA astronaut, and a Roscosmos cosmonaut. Those NASA astronauts are NASA astronaut Jessica Meir. This will be her second flight to the International Space Station, as well as NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway. It will be his very first. And then for ESA, we have European Space Agency astronaut Sophie Adenot, her first flight as well. And for Roscosmos, Andrey Fedyaev, this is his second flight to the International Space Station. And he is actually the first cosmonaut to fly in Dragon twice, and he's one of only a select few that have flown in Dragon more than once. That includes a couple private astronauts, including our NASA administrator, Jared Isaacman, Michael Lopez Alegria, as well as Peggy Whitson. We are approaching 2 minutes until the approach initiation burn this morning.
And on the bottom of your screen, you can now see some graphics there. On your left-hand side should show the thrusters on Dragon, and that approach initiation burn is coming up. So you might be able to actually see it there live on your screen, but you can also follow along with the thrusters on that graphic to show which thrusters are actually firing at any moment.
Standing by for approach initiation burn, now 1 minute out.
And also on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you can also see the range. This is about how far Dragon is from the International Space Station, as well as the rate of approach in meters per second there. So you can see how fast Dragon is moving. And it's going to look very slow and slight on your screen just because of the perspective of the International Space Station to Dragon, but both vehicles are going about 17,500 miles per hour right now around Earth, which is pretty fast.
It's so fast, in fact, that the International Space Station orbits the Earth 16 times a day, every 90 minutes.
Yeah, if you like sunsets and sunrises, you get a lot of those.
We are standing by for AI start.
It is a little bright on your screen. Dragon is still there. We're looking at Dragon from the International Space Station's view. It's a little in the top part of your screen where it's a little bright, so hard to see Dragon, but it is there. And there now you can see those burns on the bottom left-hand of your screen on the graphic there. Does mean that the approach initiation burn has begun. There you can see Dragon in the middle of your screen, just a little bit better.
As well as some great views of Earth. The International Space Station and Dragon are currently flying over the South Atlantic.
And that graphic is a really cool view because you could see how all these different thrusters are working together. It's not just one thruster or two thrusters firing at all times. It's a few little bursts here and there to help align Dragon to where it needs to go as it's approaching the International Space Station and getting ready to approach and then align with the docking adapter eventually.
That's right. This burn will help swing Dragon up until about 400 meters above the International Space Station. Freedom is going to be docking to the zenith port of Harmony this morning.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Approach initiation maneuver complete. Nominal.
Dragon copies. Nominal AI.
And again, as Sandra mentioned, the Dragon spacecraft is swinging itself up and over the International Space Station. It's going to be a very slow approach, but you could see the difference in the view that we have of Dragon. You're starting to see Earth in the background, but eventually Dragon will end up above the International Space Station.
So we did have confirmation that the AI burn wrapped up and completed as expected. So good news, that's another milestone as we approach docking targeted for 12:12 p.m. Pacific time. On board, the destination for Dragon Freedom is, of course, the International Space Station, and they're
Dragon SpaceX on Dragon to ground for suit leak checks.
SpaceX Dragon, go.
You are go to execute Section 1 of 4.011. When you complete Section 1, you can proceed into Section 2, but then we're going to hold. We're still about 5 minutes from being able to do the suit leak checks while we are still looking at the rest of the vehicle and making sure that we're good for approach.
Dragon copies, we got to go for Section 1, and we'll hold in Section 2 while you guys finish up for about 5 minutes.
And that was communications with the core here in Hawthorne up to Crew Dragon Freedom, namely to the pilot, NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway, as they continue to gear up for suit leak checks. In about 5 minutes from now, the crew is currently seated and suited up in their spacesuits. They will remain suited up all the way through this approach phase, as well as through docking, as well to the International Space Station. And on board the International Space Station, there are currently 3 astronauts and cosmonauts. As part of Expedition 74, they are living and working and conducting groundbreaking science and research. Now, last month we did have the return of Crew 11 back to Earth. But following Crew 12's arrival, the space station will have a total of 7 crew members on board and what we consider a standard crew complement.
And Crew 12 has been working in indirect handover with the Crew 11 crew on the ground and getting up to speed as much as possible ahead of their arrival to the space station.
This includes training on emergency procedures and the ins and outs of space station, but once they actually arrive on board, they will go through a more direct handover and training with NASA astronaut Chris Williams, who has been on the space station since November. These handovers between crews allow for continuity of the activities and helps to ensure a continuous U.S. presence on the space station, which we recently celebrated a major milestone of 25 years of continuous presence aboard the International Space Station. So what that means is if you are younger than 25 years old, you have never known a moment in your life where there have not been humans living off the planet, which is an incredible feat. Continuing to get some good views of Dragon Freedom as it makes its approach to the space station. The next burn that we are looking ahead towards is the mid-course burn, which will be at the top of the hour at 11 a.m. Pacific time. And this mid-course burn is more of a fine-tuning burn to ensure that the trajectory of Dragon is right on line ahead of docking. Again, we are targeting docking at 12:12 p.m. Pacific time for Crew 12.
Dragon SpaceX for 4.011.
SpaceX Dragon, go.
Ground is ready for suit leak checks, so you are go to start with step 2.1. Waiting for your call in 2.2, and then we'll give you a go.
Dragon copies, we'll get into 2.1 to give you a call, or 2.2.
Again, those were just some comms between the core and the Crew 12 crew. They are working through some very specific procedures that they're...
SpaceX Dragon, we're ready to pressurize in 2.2.
SpaceX copies, you are go for commanding in 2.3, initiate suit leak check.
Dragon is initiating suit leak check.
Again, the crew is working through some procedures, and as you just heard, they are working through a suit leak check. This is just to make sure that they've got all their suits on, and they're just going to make sure that they have a good suit leak check in preparation for when they close their visors during the approach portion to the International Space Station. We are continuing to get some pretty cool views from the International Space Station looking at Dragon. That is Dragon Freedom with the Crew 12 crew still on board.
And as Dragon approaches, we will get a clearer and sharper image of Dragon Freedom, but you are starting to be able to make out the nose cone, which is open and has remained open since shortly after launch. And this helps to expose all the guidance.
Dragon SpaceX Looks like we're low on suit 3. Can we go ahead and halt the suit leak check and we'll try again?
It looks like we are in a brief period of handover between our satellites, and we'll regain views and communication with the crew here shortly. They are continuing to step through those procedures and leak checks, which again, they remain suited and seated all the way through the docking portion. And then once they dock to the International Space Station, they will be able to get out of their spacesuits and work through hatch opening procedures. NASA astronaut Chris Williams is going to be prime for hatch opening procedures on the space station side. And then following that, the crew will be able to float on board the International Space Station for
Dragon SpaceX, for awareness, we're about to come up on a TDRS handover on Dragon to ground. This next TDRS pass will start at about 1849. That's 1849. At this time, I'll have crew execute step 2.8 to investigate suit 3, and we'll follow up for the next suit leak check at 1849.
All right, Dragon copy. You want us to execute the troubleshoot steps now, and we'll do another leak check after the TDRS pass at 1849.
Good, read back. Talk to you then.
And those were just some comms. They are currently doing or performing suit leak checks. They did have a call that there was a low pressure on suit 3, and they are currently troubleshooting that. In about 5 minutes or so, we should hear, they should be trying that suit leak check again, and we should be hearing those comms again for that procedure.
That's right. And while we wait for our next milestone, let's take a moment to meet our crew. In the commander's seat is NASA astronaut Jessica Meir, who spent a total of 205 days in space on her first space flight back in 2019 and was part of the first all-female spacewalks. She holds a biology degree from Brown University. Next to Meir is pilot Jack Hathaway, who's making his first flight to space. The Connecticut native earned bachelor's degrees in physics and history from the U.S. Naval Academy, and he has more than 2,500 flight hours in 30 types of aircraft and has flown 39 combat missions during several military operations.
Serving as a mission specialist is Sophie Adenot, representing the European Space Agency, or ESA. The French native studied engineering and specialized in spacecraft and aircraft flight dynamics during undergraduate work in France and received her master's degree from MIT. This will also be her first trip to space. Rounding out this crew is Roscosmos cosmonaut and mission specialist Andrey Fedyaev. As a major in the Russian Air Force, he's logged more than 500 hours in Russian aircraft. Back in 2023, he launched as a mission specialist as part of Crew-6, where he spent nearly 186 days aboard the International Space Station.
And that's a look at the crew that is currently aboard Crew Dragon Freedom as they look ahead towards docking at 12 p.m. Pacific time this afternoon. The crew did launch on Friday the 13th, just yesterday, and they did launch at 5:15 a.m. Eastern, 2:15 here in Pacific time. It was a beautiful launch from Space Launch Complex 40 in Florida.
Yeah, and the crew, again, as we were just mentioning, they were performing suit leak checks. They're still currently in that procedure. Again, they had a low pressurization in suit 3, so they are troubleshooting that as we speak. And at the 10:49 minute mark, they're going to try that suit leak check one more time. And again, they do this to make sure that the suits are good and ready to go, that they don't have leaks while they're docking to the International Space Station. So we should see that coming up in about a couple minutes. And we're going to check in with our partner over there at NASA's Johnny Space Center, Leah Cheshire. How's it going, Leah?
Hi, good morning, or good afternoon actually, here in Johnson Space Center. We're at the International Space Station Flight Control Room at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, where everyone here is gearing up for this afternoon's docking and looking forward to having Crew-12 aboard the station soon. So Dragon's approach will be monitored both here on the ground and from the space station's cupola using special software to track the spacecraft's approach and making sure it stays in the expected zones. Now, once Dragon is docked, NASA astronaut Chris Williams will be primed to start hatch opening operations. He's going to start by opening the large hatch on Node 2 Zenith, which is where the spacecraft's docking today, and that'll give him access into the pressurized mating adapter. The crew will also pressurize the vestibule, and that's the small space between the hatch on Dragon and the space station. This area, of course, was previously exposed to vacuum prior to docking, so the crew will need to fill it with air and make sure its pressure is nearly equal with the atmospheric pressure on Dragon and on the station side. Williams will use a small valve on the station's hatch to slowly introduce air into that vestibule, while flight controllers here in Houston will monitor and verify the pressure readings to make sure that everything is leak-free before we get ready to open up the hatches. Today on console in Mission Control Houston, we have NASA Flight Director Brandon Lloyd and the Orbit 2 team on console. For Dragon's approach and docking, to the right of Lloyd is our Capcom, that's the capsule communicator, Jacob Lesarge. He is not speaking with the crew on Dragon, but is instead talking with the crew aboard the station. We currently have 3 crew members living and working on the orbiting laboratory, and of course that's going to jump to 7 once the Crew-12 crew members arrive. Again, we're really excited to get those crew members aboard soon, and for now, that's the latest from here in Mission Control Houston. So I'll send it back over to Sandra and Jesse in Hawthorne.
Thanks, Leah. It's great to hear that everything is proceeding as expected over in Mission Control. We are looking ahead towards that AI mid-course burn 11 minutes from now at the top of the hour at 11 a.m. Pacific.
And again, we are just waiting for confirmation of that second suit leak check that the crew will be performing. Should be any minute now that we should start hearing comms about that. And coming up, once Dragon arrives at 400 meters.
Dragon SpaceX on Dragon to ground for suit leak checks.
Dragon's listening.
All right. Just want to confirm if you were able to step through all substeps of 2.8 for the suit openings and verified closed, and if you reported anything found.
We stepped through everything. It looked like my right glove may have had been only half a white tooth. But that's the only abnormality we found on all the zippers.
Okay, copy that. Looking at that zipper, just for my awareness, did we look at the umbilical at all, or the O-rings?
Yeah, we did. We looked at the umbilical, the O-rings looked good, all those connections looked good, and then we looked at the suit, the visor as well, and that seal looks decent.
Okay, copy. At that point, we're more than likely going to be ready to step into the next suit leak check. Standby 1 will get ready on the ground, and I'll give you a call. If you can go ahead and return to step 2.1 and give me a go when you guys are ready to pressurize, and we'll be giving you that go shortly.
Got it.
And then we heard the comms that they have been checking anything with the suit where there is a seal on the suit. So they sound.
SpaceX Dragon, we're ready to pressurize for suit leak check in 2.2.
All right, SpaceX copies on Dragon to ground. You are go for commanding. Initiate suit leak check.
Dragon.
And they are reperforming that suit leak check on pilot Jack Hathaway's suit. They did check the umbilicals, the O-rings, which are seals that help keep everything nice and tight and prevents leaks. Sounds like everything has checked out well so far. Potentially the glove zipper may have just not been closed all the way. So they're reperforming that suit leak check to see if we can get a good pressurization on Jack Hathaway's suit.
And coming up here shortly, once Dragon arrives at 400 meters below space station, it will be at what is known as Waypoint Zero, and that will be the first checkpoint during our approach. The spacecraft can hold here at 400 meters, but if all of its systems check out, Dragon can continue its approach to Waypoint 1. Dragon's move from Waypoint 0 to Waypoint 1 will swing it up and over top of the space station, arriving at a distance of approximately 220 meters. At this point, it will be on what we call the docking axis, which is essentially directly in front of the docking port. The crew are headed to the zenith port on space station, which is the port that is facing space. Dragon has docked to Node 2, also known as Harmony, for all of our crewed missions so far, because that's where both international docking adapters are located.
And we did get confirmation that we did get a good suit leak check on Jack Hathaway's suit, so great news. Once Dragon is only 20 meters at Waypoint 2, the spacecraft focuses on aligning its docking system with the International Docking Adapter. We may hear the call-out CHOP, which stands for Crew Hands-Off Point, a little less than 30 seconds before docking, and at this point, any aborts will have to be done automatically by Dragon.
And then the moment we've all been waiting for, the grand arrival, when our crew arrives at the International Space Station. Dragon will fly in and make contact with that IDA, giving us what we call soft capture. The soft capture ring then retracts until sensors indicate it's time for 12 hooks to drive in place to give us a hard capture and firmly secure Dragon to its new home on the space station. The station crew, namely NASA astronaut Chris Williams, will then manually pressurize the vestibule, or the area between the Dragon hatch and the station hatch. Meanwhile, umbilicals that provide power, audio, and data connections from the station to Dragon are put in place. Then it's time for leak checks and hatch opening, which is currently timelined to come a little more than 2 hours following docking.
Yeah, we are just about an hour and 15 minutes or so from that expected docking time with the International Space Station. It's a little bit of a long process. They have been coasting for quite a while now, but I'm sure the crew is very excited to make it to the International Space Station.
SpaceX Dragon, 4 nominal seats.
SpaceX copies and concurs. Good news, Jack. We see 4 healthy suits.
And with that confirmation, we heard...
Great. Yeah, we're just as happy about that as well, and that's the end of this procedure. Thanks.
SpaceX copies. Exiting 4.011. We'll go back to approach monitoring. Next event will be the mid-course maneuver coming up. Per your forward view, just about 4.5 minutes.
Dragon.
So again, we did get 4 good suit leak checks on board for Crew Dragon Freedom as we get closer to docking at targeted for 12:12 p.m. Pacific time today. Just before we lost views there, we did see Dragon on our screen briefly. From time to time, we do have handover between our satellites, and so we'll momentarily lose views and communications, but we will regain that here shortly.
Yeah, and we did have to reperform those suit leak checks, but we do have, even though they're following very specific procedures, we do make sure that there is time within the procedure to make sure that we have the time to do any troubleshooting that's needed. And we did have that time, and we're able to get some good suit leak checks and no changes to the schedule. Which is exactly why we make sure the timeline is what it is and allow some extra time for, some small off-nominal things to occur.
And the crew is in their spacesuits during what we call dynamic phases of flight. That includes the launch period, as well as when they are approaching the space station and docking to the International Space Station. And so leak checks are done during all of those phases of flight to ensure that the suit can pressurize if need be. And again, we did hear 4 good suit leak checks there. So our crew is well on their way to the International Space Station following their launch from Florida yesterday on Friday the 13th. And we do have views there of our screen. You might see some lights on Dragon. Those red and green lights, they actually indicate the direction of Dragon. So the red is the port side of Dragon, and the green is the starboard side. The white light is the top of Dragon, and the yellow is on bottom. And all of those are exposed because the nose cone is open, and as we discussed previously, that does hold all of the docking equipment and navigational sensors as Dragon continues its approach to the International Space Station. So we are standing by for the mid-course maneuver. That's the next burn that we're targeting about 3 minutes from now at 11 a.m. Pacific. And we have been talking about those spacesuits and the leak checks that just were completed. The suit's primary function is to protect the crew in the event of a cabin depressurization. If that were to occur, the suit would inflate to provide a habitat environment that the crew can live and work in long enough for the crew to return home. The flame-resistant materials on the outer layer also protect the crew in the event of a fire. The spacesuits are a custom-tailored single-piece suit, and this means that the helmet, gloves, and boots all remain attached. The helmet is made from 3D printed nylon and has a visor that pivots open, and the quick disconnect, or QD, on the right thigh mates to an umbilical on the seat. This provides air for ventilation, oxygen, nitrox for pressurization, and allows for the electronics to be connected all from a single location on the suit. A tubing network inside the suit delivers air to the neck and limbs to keep the crew cool while wearing the suit. The suit's communication system consists of helmet-mounted microphones and in-ear speakers, and it takes less than 15 minutes to put on the suit. This new IVA suit design debuted during the Crew-11 mission, and it was worn by NASA astronaut Mike Fink. And there we have in cabin views of our crew in their spacesuits in the new IVA suit, which is designed to incorporate changes developed for the Polaris Dawn mission, which had a extravehicular activity or spacewalk. This new IVA suit design removes the inseam zipper in favor of the EVA suit's spiral zipper design in the suit's torso, which allows the suit to split into an upper and lower half and makes donning and doffing, or taking off and putting on the spacesuit, easier for the crew. The new IVA suit brings all the soft goods joints from the EVA suit into the IVA suit as well, improves the upper arm, elbow, and wrist mobility. So this new design will ultimately help SpaceX scale suit production and aid their ability to manufacture spacesuits in the numbers needed in their goal to make life planetary. So we are standing by for the AI mid-course burn that is now in progress. Again, that mid-course burn is now underway, getting some views inside the spacecraft here.
And Dragon is fully autonomous, so you do see those displays there right in front of them. But as you can tell, they're not doing too much because all they're doing is monitoring. They can see what Dragon is doing as they're approaching the International Space Station. But Dragon is flying them autonomously and performing these maneuvers on its own. Again, we are waiting for that mid-course maneuver burn to begin.
And we did hear confirmation that the mid-course burn has begun, so that burn is in progress.
And again, you can see on your screen, this is a view from the International Space Station looking at Dragon. As you saw earlier, just about 10 or 15 minutes ago, you could see Earth in the background, but now Dragon, as we've been mentioning, is swinging up and over the International Space Station, and that's why you see only space in the background of that view. So this is a view inside of Dragon Freedom's cabin.
Dragon SpaceX on the Big Loop, mid-course maneuver complete, trajectory converged on Waypoint Zero.
Dragon copies.
Great news, that mid-course maneuver burn is now complete.
And so we are just an hour and some change away from docking. Again, we're targeting 12 p.m. Pacific time for today's docking to the zenith port of the International Space Station. We are getting views back inside Dragon Freedom. On the left of your screen there is the commander of Freedom. That is NASA astronaut Jessica Meir. This is her second space flight. And to her right is NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway. He's the pilot of Dragon today, and this is his very first flight in space. You can't see them on your screen there, but to the left of Jessica is ESA, or European Space Agency astronaut Sophie Adenot, and then to the right is Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrey Fedyaev. This is his second flight to the International Space Station, and we mentioned it before, but he's the first cosmonaut to fly inside Dragon twice.
Yeah, we got to get them some frequent flyer passes.
Yes. He joins the club of a few others that have flown in Dragon more than once. That includes NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman, Michael Lopez Alegria, and Peggy Whitson. And we have been checking in from here in Hawthorne, but over in Mission Control Houston, the team is working through a poll as we speak for the go, no-go to continue to approach the International Space Station. The team in Mission Control does a variety of polls as we approach docking, and this happens ahead of launch and any dynamic phases in flight to ensure that all the systems are go, all the...
Again, with a question.
SpaceX here on Dragon to ground.
SpaceX Dragon timeline. Can you give us a new planned docking time? The updated docking time?
Affirm, standby 1.
And so the ground is going to take a look at if the docking time has adjusted at all following the burns that we have been covering this morning. That happens as the trajectory gets aligned ahead of docking. We were targeting a 12 p.m. Pacific time docking, but we'll stand by to hear if that has changed and been adjusted based off of the burn that was just completed.
Dragon SpaceX for expected docking time.
We're ready to copy.
All right, on Dragon to ground, expected time is about 2011. That's 2011.
2011. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it.
And with that call out, we do have an updated targeted docking time. It is now 12:11 p.m. Pacific for Dragon Freedom to arrive to the zenith port of the International Space Station and complete its docking. Again, we're targeting 12:11 p.m. Pacific time for docking. So we'll continue to provide updates as we lead up to docking today at 12:11 p.m. Pacific. To take a look back, though, about 45 minutes after liftoff, Dragon executed a phase burn at 3:02 a.m. Pacific, 6:02 a.m. Eastern, to begin fine-tuning its orbit ahead of approach to the International Space Station. Dragon then performed the boost burn at 4:13 a.m. Pacific, or 8:13 a.m. Eastern. This is the first of several major burns required to raise Dragon's orbit and position it for approach to the International Space Station. The boost burn put Crew in an orbit where Dragon's apogee, or highest point, is 10 kilometers lower than the space station. But before we can approach the space station, we need Dragon's entire orbit, not just the highest point, to be effectively shadowing the space station. So after that, the close burn at 4:59 a.m. Pacific occurred. That was at 8:59 a.m. Eastern.
The close burn placed Dragon on an orbit roughly co-elliptic with the space station, meaning that it was maintaining an orbit roughly 10 kilometers lower than the station the entire way around the Earth. And again, that's in contrast to only being 10 kilometers lower than the station during Dragon's apogee, or the highest point of its orbit, which was achieved by the boost burn beforehand.
And from there, at 6:41 a.m. Pacific, 9:41 a.m. Eastern, we executed the third major maneuver known as the transfer burn. And this is where we raised Dragon's apogee, or highest point of its orbit, to just 2.5 kilometers lower than space station. Then we rounded everything out with a final co-elliptic burn at 7:27 a.m. Pacific, 10:27 a.m. Eastern, to once again maintain a constant orbit lower than the station, this time just 2.5 kilometers below. And this was a shorter burn lasting just over 30 seconds. We then had the approach initiation burn, which began the final stages of Dragon's rendezvous with the space station. This is also when we started integrated operations between the Dragon control team here in Hawthorne and the space station flight controllers in Mission Control Houston. The teams entered integrated operations prior to the approach initiation occurring.
During the approach, SpaceX's flight controllers work in tandem with the NASA team in Houston to maneuver Dragon to the proper attitude and initialize the navigation sensors used for the methodical approach to station. They also activated and tested out a number of systems on Dragon, including bidirectional communications with the station using the C2V2 system. C2V2 stands for Common Communications for Visiting Vehicles. It sets up a data stream from Dragon to the station, giving another path for Dragon telemetry to come to the ground and giving an additional command capability to astronauts aboard the station.
The NASA and SpaceX teams did a go-no-go poll to move Dragon inside the keep-out sphere, which is another checkpoint that consists of an imaginary sphere around station with a radius of 200 meters. Flight controllers use this to monitor all arriving and departing spacecraft, and this is another chance to confirm all of the guidance, navigation, and control systems are working correctly on Dragon before.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Ground is go for approach 0, and we'll be enabling the maneuver shortly. Expected approach 0 start at 1921 Zulu. That's 1921 Zulu. Reminder that Dragon will nominally continue approach through Waypoint 1 towards Waypoint 2.
Go for approach 0, 1921.
And with that poll now wrapped up, we are go for approach to Waypoint 0. This poll is another chance to confirm all the guidance, navigation, and control systems are working correctly on Dragon before moving closer to station. And it carries a similar requirement on the orbital trajectory that if Dragon were to somehow lose control of its thrusters, it and the space station would be safe for 4 orbits, or about 6 hours, rather than the 24 hours required to enter the approach ellipsoid.
Once Dragon arrives at 400 meters below station, it will be at what is known as Waypoint Zero and will be the first checkpoint during our approach. The vehicle can hold here at 400 meters, but if all systems check out, which we heard that we may pass through straight through and continue to approach Waypoint 1.
Dragon's move from Waypoint 0 to Waypoint 1 will swing it up and out on top of the space station, arriving at a distance of approximately 220 meters. At this point, it will be on what we call the docking axis, which essentially means it is directly in front of the docking port. The crew are headed to the zenith, or space-facing port, on Station 2. Dragon has docked to Node 2, also known as Harmony, for all of the crewed missions so far, because that's where both international docking adapters are located.
Station, this is Houston on the big loop. Expect to start monitoring Dragon in approximately 45 minutes for Node 2 Zenith. Additionally, for Chris, we're seeing that the RPOP information is likely no joy, so you'll likely be PCS and potentially centerline camera only for approach monitoring.
Station copies all. Begin monitoring in 45 minutes, and I see the same on the RPOP display, and copy centerline approach camera and PCS only.
Houston copies. That's a good readback.
And those communications from the ground up to NASA astronaut Chris Williams, who is going to be monitoring today's docking and approach of Dragon Freedom. You heard some communications about the RPOP. This is the Rendezvous and Proximity Operations Situational Awareness Tool. That doesn't seem to be working today, but no issue. Chris Williams is going to continue to be able to monitor Dragon's approach to the zenith port of the International Space Station today. We're targeting a docking at approximately 12:11 p.m. Pacific time today.
And once Dragon is only 20 meters at Waypoint 2, the spacecraft focuses on aligning its docking system with the International Docking Adapter. And again, we may hear the call-out CHOP, which stands for Crew Hands-Off Point, a little less than 30 seconds before docking. At this point, any aborts will have to be done automatically by Dragon itself.
And finally, we will have the arrival of Crew Dragon Freedom to the International Space Station. Dragon will fly in and make contact with the IDA, giving us what we call soft capture. The soft capture ring then retracts until sensors indicate it's time for 12 hooks to drive in place to give us a hard capture and firmly secure Dragon to its new home on the space station. The station crew, namely NASA astronaut Chris Williams, will work to manually pressurize the vestibule or the area between the Dragon hatch and the space station hatch. Meanwhile, umbilicals that provide power, audio, and data connections from the space station to Dragon are put in place. Then it's time for leak checks and hatch opening, which is currently timelined to come a little more than 2 hours following docking.
Again, you can see the graphic on your screen. Dragon approached from below the International Space Station and has now swung up and is pretty much above the International Space Station as we're getting closer and closer to docking, which is just under an hour from now.
And a short time ago, we did execute the mid-course maneuver, which again is done about halfway from our starting point of approach initiation to Waypoint Zero. It's a small burn just to fine-tune our approach to ensure we're targeting a precise point 400 meters directly above the space station.
Once Dragon arrives at 400 meters below station, it will be at what is known as Waypoint Zero and will be the first checkpoint during our approach. The vehicle can hold here if necessary at 400 meters, but if all systems check out, it can continue to approach the Waypoint 1. We're about 100 meters away from Waypoint Zero. And again, you're looking at a view from Dragon now, looking forward to the International Space Station.
SpaceX Dragon on Dragon to ground.
SpaceX ready to copy, Dragon to ground.
Just a question, you guys are running our cooling. Is it any chance that we can make it a little bit cooler in here for the rest of the rendezvous, or do we set it to full cold right now?
SpaceX copies. Right now we're already in full hex, so I think the current temperature we're going to proceed with through docking. How copy?
Copy. We're up with that. Thank you, sir.
Just some comms between the core and the crew, asking for it to be a little bit cooler. Now they are in their suits, so it does get a little bit warmer, but the suits do have air flowing through them, almost like a portable AC or personal AC system for them. But it sounds like they're going to maintain the temperature in the cabin for the crew all the way through docking. But it sounds like the crew is okay with that. And on the bottom of your screen, you can see two key numbers. On the right-hand bottom corner, you'll see the range. That's the distance from Dragon to the space station. And the rate is how fast that distance is closing, so between Dragon and the International Space Station. As we get closer, that rate slows down and almost like easing into a parking spot in orbit. Dragon uses short bursts from its onboard Draco thrusters to fine-tune its movements. Now, when you see the small white bursts in the graphic on the bottom left-hand of your screen, that is the spacecraft precisely adjusting its position or speed as it approaches the station. Docking status refers to the physical connection between Dragon and the space station. And soft capture means the initial contact has been made and the docking ring has latched. Hard capture follows when a series of hooks and clamps fully secure the spacecraft to the station, and that's when we call the final docking to the International Space Station. Yeah, and we are getting closer and closer to that docking to the International Space Station, expected at 12:11 p.m. Pacific time today.
That's right. And when that happens, we actually have two astronauts that will be experiencing the International Space Station for their very first time. That is NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway, who is the pilot of Dragon Freedom, as well as ESA, or European Space Agency astronaut Sophie Adenot. I'm so excited to see them on board for the very first time. They have been experiencing microgravity for the past 30 hours, a little over that, but once they're on space station, they'll really be able to spread out and get acquainted with their home for the next several months.
Yeah, we do have a diverse crew. So we have two people with some experience in space, probably helping out the space rookies on board, which is pretty cool. And again, we mentioned that Commander Jessica Meir, this is her second flight, but first flight on Dragon. And then our mission specialist, Andrey Fedyaev, it's actually his second flight on Dragon itself. He actually flew on Crew-6 previously, which is pretty cool.
That is. It seems like just yesterday.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yes. And so once they do dock, NASA astronaut Chris Williams, as we've been mentioning, is going to be primed for those hatch operations, as well as monitoring Dragon as it comes in for its approach. We're now less than an hour away from our approximate docking time today at 12:11 p.m. Pacific. But he'll be monitoring from the space station's cupola, also known as the window to the world. This is a contribution from the European Space Agency to the International Space Station and has a series of 6 windows where the crew can look out at the Earth below, as well as take incredible photography. And I've never experienced it myself, but I'm told it's one of the favorite hangout spots for the crew on board the space station, which you could imagine why.
Yeah, I think that's where I'd be hanging out if I was on the International Space Station. I believe it's also the 16th year for having that cupola on board the International Space Station as well.
That's right. It's actually a year of anniversaries. This is the 15th year of the Commercial Crew program since its startup, so congratulations to them on that. And then just recently, back in November of last year, the International Space Station completed a massive major milestone with 25 years of continuous human presence on board the space station.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible to have humans in space for that long, and it's so cool to be able to be a part of that.
And in that time, we've seen over 270 people fly to the International Space Station, as well as seen several private astronaut missions. So it is great to see that more people are having the opportunity to experience space and go to the International Space Station.
And what you're seeing on your screen is mission control here in Hawthorne, California at SpaceX. We are currently in between communications with the Dragon spacecraft. So once we do get some live views back, we will obviously share them as soon as we can. But so far, the Crew-12 crew is on Dragon Freedom. They are healthy and getting ready to approach the International Space Station. Again, docking is planned for 12:11 p.m. Pacific time today. Oh, perfect timing. Some live views there. And we are from the International Space Station looking at that bright dot in the center, top center of your screen. That is Dragon. We're going to check in with Mission Control Houston with NASA's Leah Cheshire. Leah, how's it going?
Thanks, Jesse and Sandra. We're doing great over here in Mission Control Houston and just heard that we have approached Waypoint Zero. As you can see, the thrusters on Dragon are firing from this view aboard the space station. Just off to the left of the screen, that's one of the International Space Station's solar arrays. As you can see in the bottom of your screen, you can keep up with the distance of Dragon from the space station, now 384 meters away. We are at Waypoint Zero. This is the first of one of these upcoming pauses. We will then move to Waypoint 1, expecting that in about 30 minutes before flying into Waypoint 2. We typically do a little hold at that point before flying in for contact and capture of Dragon to the zenith or space-facing port of the International Space Station. Dragon won't be the only Dragon aboard the space station right now. We also have SpaceX's 33rd commercial resupply mission still aboard the International Space Station. These continuous resupply missions help keep the crew stocked with all of their consumables, whether that be
Dragon
food
SpaceX
or
on
water.
the big loop. Approach 0 is in progress and trajectory has converged on Waypoint 1.
Copy.
We are less than an hour from the arrival of Crew-12 to the International Space Station today, a mission that began yesterday morning at 5:15 a.m. Eastern Time, 4:15 a.m. Central. And it looks like we are coming into almost an orbital daytime for the International Space Station. As Jesse mentioned earlier, the space station is traveling at approximately 17,500 miles per hour around the Earth and sees 16 sunrises and sunsets a day. So what's happening now is they are crossing the terminator line over the North Pacific Ocean, and that terminator line is what differentiates between day and night when you are in space. Dragon is traveling equally as fast as the International Space Station, but also performing maneuvers very closely timed around the orbiting laboratory to keep its approach methodical, to keep it safe. We say slow and steady wins the race sometimes when it comes to two vehicles docking. Sandra also previously touched on this being the 25th year, which started last November, of human presence aboard the International Space Station. So just some fun facts about that time aboard. During that time, the International Space Station has traveled 4,361,970,010 miles around the Earth, and has had 1.5 million pounds of cargo delivered. That's, again, what keeps the space station going with all of the consumables needed for the crew, as well as experiments that they've conducted aboard the space station. And of those experiments, we've seen over 4,000 research investigations conducted above the orbiting laboratory, making life better, not just in space and preparing us for future deep space missions to the moon and Mars, but also improving life for us here on Earth. Those 4,000 research investigations have been conducted by over 5,000 researchers from over 110 countries. And in that time, we've seen over 270 spacewalks with over 1,700 hours logged outside the orbiting laboratory. Now, this view coming to you from inside the Dragon capsule itself, you're looking over the shoulders of Commander Jessica Meir and pilot Jack Hathaway. This is Meir's second flight to the space station, which looks big and beautiful in your screen right now, that view coming from Dragon itself. And this is Jack Hathaway's first flight to the orbiting lab. And if you look at the very top of the space station, top as in up toward the top of your screen, you'll see that other Dragon that's currently docked. Again, that's the Commercial Resupply 33 mission, SpaceX's 33rd commercial resupply mission to the space station. What you see in front of the crew are their crew displays. They're able to monitor the entire flight to the space station, and again, once they begin their journey home, not for several months from now, but they are suited and seated. We consider these dynamic operations. We also consider these integrated operations. So that big loop is established, allowing all of the parties at play here to communicate with each other. That includes the Capcom here in Mission Control Houston, the core at SpaceX, and both the crews aboard the International Space Station and aboard Dragon itself. Integrated operations also begin when we enter the approach ellipsoid, which we already discussed happened really close to the top of this broadcast, and we will remain in these integrated operations until the crew begins their departure from the space station, again, not for several months from now. During that time, they're going to stay busy working with the research aboard the space station, living and working aboard our orbiting laboratory. Back to these crew displays, of course, we mentioned that the crew has the option to monitor the spacecraft as they fly to their intended destination. They also have the capability to take over command if they needed to of Dragon, but the entirety of the flight is intended to be autonomous, and the crew steps back and monitors. This is a great view of the space station, and if you look closely on those solar arrays, those 8 large solar arrays, you'll see on top of some of them we have a smaller, what looks like second array, and that's what it is. It's the International Space Station Rollout Solar Array, also known as IROSA, helping to provide additional power to the International Space Station. Again, this view coming from Dragon to the space station. Of course, both spacecraft can see each other now. NASA astronaut Chris Williams will be monitoring Dragon's approach to the station from the cupola. As Sandra put it, the window to the world. We have 3 crew members living and working aboard the space station right now that arrived on the Soyuz MS-28 spacecraft. That includes Sergei Mikhaev, Sergei Kutsverchkov, both of Roscosmos, and as aforementioned, NASA astronaut Chris Williams. All 3 of those crew members are awake right now. This is an orbital, this is their wake time. The International Space Station uses GMT as their time zone. It's sort of a branch between Houston and Russia where we monitor the Russian segment. This view of Dragon from the space station, if you look to the right side of your screen, looking pretty small there, but they'll continue to get closer, flying over the North Pacific Ocean about 260 statute miles above Earth. And of course, as we have discussed, Dragon will be docking to the zenith or space-facing port on the Harmony module. So we will start to lose the views of Earth behind Dragon, and instead Dragon will be seeing Earth behind the space station. And if you've ever been interested, you can indeed see the space station with your own eye. We have a tool that helps you do that as well. It's called Spot the Station. If you just go online to nasa.gov, check out Spot the Station. You can input your location and you'll receive a list of upcoming visibilities at dusk and dawn when the International Space Station is flying over your area. It's a pretty incredible thing to see, knowing that we will soon have 7 people living and working on it. Coming up on just 400 meters away from the International Space Station, again, the next milestone for Dragon will be to reach Waypoint 1. Waypoint 1 is sometimes a pause location. However, we are expected to continue straight through to Waypoint 2. That can be that is about 20 meters away from the space station. That's the final hold point before the crew gets the go to move in toward the docking hatch. Now, if you are paying attention to the bottom left side of your screen, you can see where the thrusters on Dragon are firing to keep it in its proper location as we continue the slow and steady approach to the International Space Station. You can also see a little map of Earth. As I just mentioned, we're flying over the North Pacific Ocean, both the International Space Station and Dragon, and they are just about to cross south of Portland, Oregon, and down through the southwest of the United States into the Gulf. Teams here in Mission Control Houston are conducting their go, no-go poll to approach Waypoint 1. These polls happen at all times of a major dynamic moment during the flight. Again, Flight Director Brandon Lloyd leading the teams here today. This is the Orbit 2 team on console. The International Space Station is staffed 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, as we have crew living on board the space station at all times. This beautiful view coming from the space station of Dragon as they both prepare to cross over the northwest of the United States of America. As you can see, the Dragon capsule has already changed its positioning with the International Space Station. You previously could see the outline of that commercial resupply Dragon docked to the space station, but now we can't. We have moved up, and we will continue to move up toward that zenith or space-facing port on the Harmony module of the International Space Station. And as we mentioned, we do have 3 people living and working aboard the space station. So far today, they have completed their exercise. All crew members are required to exercise approximately 2 hours a day, every day while in space. Obviously, you're not using your bones or muscles as strongly as you would on the Earth during that time. And so these extended periods of exercise allow us to help keep the astronauts' bones strong while they are in a microgravity environment. Aside from their exercise, they've also enjoyed their midday meals. Chris Williams having just wrapped that up about 30 minutes ago, and the Roscosmos cosmonauts conducting some photo and video work inside the International Space Station. Chris Williams, NASA astronaut, will be primed to monitor Dragon's approach and then assist with the hatch opening operations. That includes pressurizing the vestibule, which is that small area between both the International Space Station and the Dragon hatch. Now, once the crew has docked today, we will, and once those hatches are open, we'll have a PAO event. That'll be their welcome ceremony. They'll get to discuss how it feels to be on the International Space Station, so we hope you'll stay tuned for that. After that welcome ceremony, we'll move into the International Space Station safety briefing. That's requiring participation from all crew members. That is the very first thing they do while on the space station. And then our new crew members will also get into some of the brief handover that'll take place tonight with the crew on the space station already. So again, we don't have any crew members coming home in the near future, but these handover types are to help the new crew get up to speed on what's been happening aboard the space station.
Dragon on Dragon to ground.
SpaceX ready on Dragon to ground.
Yeah, we during the PMC we had a little bit ago, we made a tentative plan to do another PMC as soon as possible after the docking, and we're going to go forward with that plan. So if you just have the surgeon ready for us after we get all docked, we would appreciate that.
SpaceX copies, and yes, we are tracking that and we'll be ready to support.
Thanks a lot. We appreciate it.
And as you heard, the crew called down to the International Space Station Flight Control Room here in Houston, Texas. They have requested another PMC. That's a private medical conference. We keep our flight doctors on standby for these during a mission. Of course, this is a something that happens frequently aboard the International Space Station and aboard our spacecraft is we prepare for private medical conferences. We have those standard, and so the crew is able to request one at any time. We're continuing to monitor Dragon's approach to the International Space Station. Again, expecting that docking in approximately 33 minutes. That would be at about 12:11 p.m. Pacific time, which is where I'm going to toss it back to SpaceX in Hawthorne, California, and my colleagues Jesse and Sandra. How is it going over there?
Thanks so much, Leah. It is going well here in Hawthorne. As you can see on the left of your screen there, that is the mission control team here in Hawthorne. And then thank you for giving us all the updates from there in the room on your right. That is Mission Control Houston. We're continuing to monitor approach. As you mentioned, we are targeting an approximate docking at 12:11 p.m. Pacific time today for Dragon Freedom to the zenith port of the International Space Station. At this point, they are continuing to close in on that docking point. They're now 449 meters away. And once they do dock to the International Space Station, they will join a variety of other spacecraft currently docked. In fact, there are 6 other spacecraft currently docked to the International Space Station. That includes NASA's SpaceX Cargo Resupply Mission 33, the 33rd Cargo Resupply Mission, as well as JAXA, or Japan Aerospace Agency Astronauts HTV-X1, Northrop Grumman Cygnus NG-23, Soyuz MS-28, which brought up NASA astronaut Chris Williams in November, who we have been mentioning multiple times is going to be prime for monitoring approach and docking today, as well as 2 Progress cargo spacecraft from Roscosmos, Progress 93 and Progress 92, 92 rather. And once we do regain views of the International Space Station, you'll see those various cargo spacecraft on your screen as they occupy the space station's docking ports. And we have been talking quite a bit about milestones that have been achieved over the past few years and months. It seems like we're hitting a lot of firsts in spaceflight, which is great. One of which that I did want to mention is that back in December, for the very first time ever, all 8 of space station's docking ports were fully occupied. So for the first time ever, we did have 8 spacecraft on orbit.
And although we're not getting any live views, you can still follow along with Dragon. In your bottom left-hand corner, you could see that some of those thrusters are firing. Again, the Dragon spacecraft is autonomous and is using those thrusters to ensure that Dragon is maneuvering slowly and steadily, as Leah mentioned earlier, to the space station. Each one of those little bursts help control the vehicle, orient it in the correct orientation as it's moving towards the locations that it needs to align with the International Space Station's docking adapter. And a view from inside of the Dragon cabin. On your left-hand screen is Commander Jessica Meir, and on your right is Pilot Jack Hathaway. And as they're monitoring the autonomous vehicle on their display screens, and another view from the Dragon spacecraft looking at the International Space Station. It looks bright here and maybe looks small from this view, but it's actually about the size of a football field, which is pretty large. They've got a lot of space out there in space.
That's right. And the International Space Station and Dragon are actually flying over the continental United States as we speak. They're right overhead of Laredo, Texas. So if you're outside in Laredo and you're watching this, step outside and wave up to our Crew Dragon Freedom crew members as they approach their new home for a long-duration science and research mission aboard the International Space Station. As part of some of the science that the crew will be working on during their expedition, they will be working on an IV fluid bag experiment, seeing if they can take IV fluid from the water processing system on board the International Space Station. And this is really critical as we venture out further into the solar system because, as you can imagine, water is quite heavy to launch, and you'll need IV bags for a variety of medical reasons on long-duration space flights. So if we're able to create these IV bags in the microgravity of space using recycled water, that's one less thing that we have to bring, and it creates the availability of crew members to utilize those if needed. So I'm excited to see how that science experiment goes, and you can follow along with all the science and research being done on board the International Space Station with our Space Station blog. We put out updates daily on what the crew is up to, the science and research investigations, as well as launch updates and everything to deal with the International Space Station. So check it out if you haven't already. It's a great resource.
Yeah, it's a great reminder that the International Space Station is a laboratory. This is where they perform all these different science experiments, and again, for many different reasons, but ultimately to make life better out in space, but also here on Earth.
So continuing to get an even more clear view of the International Space Station there. You can see the solar arrays as well as the augmented solar arrays, the IROSAs, or the ISS rollout solar arrays. They're the smaller arrays stacked on some of the arrays you see there. And while they're smaller, they actually generate more power than the large arrays due to enhanced technology that has been developed since the time that those initial solar arrays launched.
And again, in your bottom right-hand screen, you have the graphic for the range. Dragon is currently about 413 meters away from the International Space Station. Again, we do have some great views switching between seeing the vantage point of Dragon looking at the International Space Station, as well as views from inside of the cabin as the crew is patiently awaiting their approach to the International Space Station.
And back inside of Dragon Freedom on your left, that is the commander, Jessica Meir. This is her second space flight, and to her right is NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway. This is his first flight to the International Space Station, and he's serving as the pilot today. And then you can't quite see them, but there are two other members on board Dragon. To the left, European Space Agency astronaut Sophie Adenot, her very first space flight. And to their right is Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrey Fedyaev. This is his second space flight.
And as you saw, the crew is still suited up in their spacesuits, harnessed into their customized seats for each of the astronauts. And they'll remain in their spacesuits. When we do get closer to the International Space Station, they will close their visors in preparation for docking. And that's just in case of any depressurization during that process. It's just a safety precaution. But if everything goes well, they will dock to the International Space Station, get out of those seats, and get out of their suits and get comfortable before they're able to float their way onto the International Space Station.
And so we did reach Waypoint Zero, which means that Dragon is 400 meters directly below station. And we are continuing to see views of it now coming from Dragon of the International Space Station, as well as there's a view of Dragon from the International Space Station as it continues its approach, now less than 400 meters away. So the next
SpaceX Dragon, we just want to confirm we expect, and when do we think we're going to get to go for suit doffing?
A firm docking at about 2011. Go for suit doffing will be immediately following hard capture complete, approximately 10 minutes later.
Okay, that's what we're tracking to. Appreciate it.
All right, copy.
And I think that's all of our questions.
All right, copy. We are back on Dragon to ground.
And just some comms there, the crew asking when they'll be able to doff or get out of their spacesuits. Sounds like it'll be about 10 minutes after hard capture, which is when the 12 hooks that connect with the International Space Station fully engage and create a hard capture between Dragon and the International Space Station.
And so on those tablets that you do see on your screen there, the crew is looking at procedures ahead of the upcoming docking targeted for an approximate time of 12:11 p.m. Pacific time today. And so they're reviewing those procedures as they near that, making sure that everything is fresh in their mind. And in addition to tablets, the crew actually had the opportunity to bring iPhones with them on board the flight for the very first time. So they'll be able to capture some imagery of the Earth, of themselves, of what they're doing as they are living and working aboard the International Space Station. And I'm looking forward to seeing all that they'll be able to capture with a camera in their pocket, just like all of us here on Earth. There are high-definition cameras on board the International Space Station as well that the crew receives training on as part of their training ahead of their launch, but I think it will be nice to see the imagery that is maybe a little bit quicker just to grab and point and click.
Yeah, I think that's really exciting that they'll be able to almost act like us here on Earth with their personal cameras with them, personal phone, and be able to, capture life on the International Space Station from each of their perspectives. I think that's going to be really awesome to see.
Yes, absolutely. And we did mention the Space Station blog a little bit earlier. We share photos that the crew captures on orbit there, as well as we have a variety of Flickr accounts where you can check out that, as well as social media. So I do encourage you to follow along. Some of my favorites are to see the aurora of the Earth as the crew is able to capture that, as well as imagery of the moon that they can capture from the unique vantage point of the International Space Station. Particularly exciting for us at NASA as we are targeting the Artemis II flight, a 10-day test flight around the moon to test out the Orion spacecraft and its systems ahead of a future lunar landing mission. So it'll be very cool to see that. And then also another exciting data point for this particular flight is we are planning to have a ship-to-ship call between the Orion spacecraft and the International Space Station. So Crew-12 will be able to participate in that ship-to-ship call during their mission.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome for the astronauts to be able to talk to each other at different places while they're in space.
So Dragon is that small white dot that you see on your screen there. And you can also see a little bit of the Canadarm2. That is a robotic arm that can be maneuvered from the ground and can be utilized it's used during spacewalks as well as during cargo spacecraft operations.
And the Dragon spacecraft is just about 313 meters away, making its way to Waypoint 2, which should be about 220 meters away from the space station.
And Dragon and Space Station are passing over northwest South America near Ecuador. Just a few minutes ago, we mentioned that it was passing over Texas, so that really just goes to show how quickly Dragon and the International Space Station are flying at 17,500 miles per hour. Doesn't look like they're flying that fast, but they are. The International Space Station orbits the Earth 16 times a day.
And again, it doesn't look like it's doing much from this view, but you can follow the Dragon thrusters in your bottom left-hand corner with that graphic, you could see that the thrusters are firing as needed to maintain the trajectory that it needs to approach the International Space Station. And again, it's getting out of view as Dragon gets closer and closer to the International Space Station, but the top left-hand corner, and there it goes. That was Earth.
SpaceX Dragon with a question.
SpaceX is here on Dragon to ground.
We have one more 30-second question for the doc. If there's time now, we can wait a few minutes.
A firm, standby 1.
And as we continue to look ahead towards docking at approximately 12:11 p.m. Pacific time today, we are going to talk a little bit about the mission patch for Crew-12. Most people are familiar with the idea of a mission patch, but you might not know how they come to exist. For decades, crew members have worked together to develop the patch for their mission, determining which aspects of the mission they want to highlight. So again, you do see Crew-12's mission patch on your screen. For decades, crew members are able to work together to develop the patch for their mission, determining which aspects of the mission they want to highlight and any special details they'd like to include. The crew themselves can design their patch, or they can share their design ideas with an artist who makes it come to life.
Crew-12's patch sets the scene of the crew's odyssey through an enchanted forest where adventure awaits around every corner. The trees with fresh buds emerging manifest both the crew's love and respect for nature and their hope and optimism for the future. Bright stars shine in the sky, lighting a path for each crew member, surrounded by smaller stars embodying their offspring. A mythical dragon breathes fire to fuel the trajectory of Dragon and set this crew on their mission to the International Space Station, invoking the delicate balance and connections between living things and the technology that supports them, and the spirit of partnership between NASA and SpaceX. The flags of the crew members' home nations stand along the curvature of their one home planet, demonstrating the solid foundation and relationships that have supported them throughout their individual and collective journeys. And a great live view from the International Space Station. As you can see, Dragon is much closer, and you can actually see a very, very clear view of that forward bulkhead with the nose cone open, exposing the GNC. That is what is help guiding Dragon as it approaches the International Space Station.
And there are 3 configurations that Dragon can have. Today's configuration is, of course, to dock to the International Space Station, but there's also a configuration where that forward bulkhead is a window, as well as the availability for that to be opened up as part of spacewalks that can occur.
Yeah, it can have the Skywalker setup, which is basically aids, mobility aids during a spacewalk on Dragon. And the cupola, the window, as Sandra mentioned, as Skywalker, are both used for free flyer missions. But since this mission is to the International Space Station, we do need that docking adapter. That's actually where
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, approach 1 and soft capturing extension will begin shortly. Dragon will continue approach to Waypoint 2.
Copy.
Great news. Just some comms from the core letting the crew know that they will be able to continue to approach to Waypoint 2. And as I was mentioning, with the international docking adapter configuration for Dragon, that's actually where the crew will pass through and enter to the International Space Station. Will be through this forward hatch that we're looking at right now.
That's right, and you did hear some communications there from the ground about the soft capture ring and stepping through procedures ahead of opening up that hatch following docking. NASA astronaut Chris Williams will be primed for those hatch opening operations today. We are less than 10 meters away from Waypoint 1 today. We did get the go that the team is comfortable approaching Waypoint 2.
Currently, Dragon Freedom and the Crew-12 crew are about 221 meters away from the International Space Station. Waypoint 2, just to give some perspective, is just about 20 meters away from the station. And once we get to Waypoint 2, the vehicle, the Dragon spacecraft, will align itself with the docking adapter in preparation for that final approach for docking. Again, expected at 12:11 p.m. Pacific time, just about 12 minutes away.
Station Houston on the big loop. Please monitor approach per step 3 of 1.102, Dragon approach and retreat monitoring. Chris, let us know when your review is complete and when you are ready for docking.
Station copies all, picking up step 3, 1.102.
You got it. Good read.
And we are through Waypoint 1. Before reaching Waypoint 1 mission.
Station review is complete. Ready for docking.
Houston copies. You are ready for docking.
And again, some good communications, everything looking good for docking, targeted here at approximately 12:11 p.m. Pacific. And
Station Houston on the big loop. At Waypoint 2, Dragon will briefly pause to align for docking, then automatically resume approach.
Station copies all.
At this point, we have passed through Waypoint 0 as well as Waypoint 1. Initial contact between Dragon and the International Space Station is expected at about 12:11 p.m. Pacific time or 3:11 p.m. Eastern. And before reaching Waypoint 1, mission operators conducted a go, no-go poll to allow Dragon to begin its approach to Waypoint 2, which is located inside the keep-out sphere about 20 meters away from the space station.
as mentioned previously, all visiting vehicles take this phased approach to station, stopping at predetermined gates for teams to run quick checks on vehicle performance before approaching station. When it comes to bringing two spacecraft together, slow and steady really does win the race, as docking operations require a great deal of precision to make sure we're keeping the spacecraft and the crew safe.
At the 20-meter distance from station's docking adapter, Dragon's approach will slow, and it will begin to align itself with the adapter to come in for the final approach.
Dragon will first make initial soft contact with the adapter soft capture ring, which will then retract to bring Dragon in for the hard capture sequence. As a further precaution, Dragon's soft capture system includes a set of rotary spring dampeners to lessen the force of the contact between the spacecraft and the station. So with that, let's check in with Leah Cheshire in Houston for an update on Space Station. Leah?
Thanks, Sandra. Right now, the crew aboard station is preparing for the upcoming docking of Dragon. Again, we're expecting that just a little over 10 minutes from now. So everything is continuing to look good here on the space station side. Flight Director Brandon Lloyd just polled the rest of the room to make sure that we are all go, and Mission Control Houston is. NASA astronaut Chris Williams will be in the station's cupola using special software to track Dragon's approach and make sure it stays in its expected zones. He'll also be primed for the hatch opening procedure operations once Dragon is docked. So during these operations, he'll start by opening the large hatch on the Node 2 zenith, that's the space-facing port, and give them access into the pressurized mating adapter. The crew will pressurize the vestibule, and that's the small space between the hatches on Dragon and the space station. Of course, this was previously, or currently still, exposed to vacuum prior to docking, so the crew will need to fill that with air and make sure its pressure is almost equal with the atmospheric pressure on Dragon and the space station. Chris Williams will use a small valve on the station's hatch to slowly introduce air into the station's vestibule. Now, flight controllers here in Houston will monitor and verify the pressure readings to make sure everything is leak-free before we get ready to open up those hatches. And this is, again, another slow and steady process, so it can take a couple of hours to complete. We are tracking docking coming up at 2:11 p.m. Central, 12:11 p.m. Pacific. It's followed by hatch opening about 4 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Pacific. So we're going to round that all out with that welcome ceremony I discussed earlier as Crew-12 officially joins the Expedition 74 crew currently aboard the International Space Station. Again, everything is go from here in Mission Control Houston, so sending it back over to Hawthorne for docking.
Dragon SpaceX.
SpaceX Dragon on the big loop, please up. SpaceX Dragon on the big loop, please up, visors down.
All right, SpaceX copies, visors down, and I can confirm soft capture ring extension complete. We are not planning to hold at Waypoint 2. We'll go through approach 2 prep.
Dragon copies, no hold on approach 2.
Just another indication that we are getting closer and closer to docking. We did hear that call out that they can put their visors down. This fully seals their suits in preparation for the official docking to the International Space Station. Now we are at 110 meters away from the International Space Station, and Waypoint 2 is up next, and that will put Dragon only 20 meters away from the space station. From here, the spacecraft will focus on aligning its docking system with the International Docking Adapter.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. We did copy that the visors are down, looking for confirmation that crew are ready and go for approach 2.
Crew is ready for approach 2.
And with that, we did get confirmation from NASA astronaut and the commander of Dragon Freedom that the crew's visors are down on their spacesuits and that they are go for docking now less than 100 meters away from the International Space Station. Approximate docking time today that we are tracking is 12:11 p.m. Pacific, so just minutes away from now.
They are approaching Waypoint 2 now. It should only take a few minutes, 2 or 3 more minutes. You could follow along with the distance. It was moving pretty slow, but now you could see the range there in your bottom right-hand corner, almost at 80 meters away from the International Space Station.
And just prior to docking, you will hear a call out for CHOP, which stands for Crew Hands-Off Point. That occurs...
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Ground is go for approach 2, and we'll be enabling approach 2 shortly.
Dragon copy, so.
Again, that call out that you'll hear about 30 seconds before docking, called CHOP, is for the crew hands-off point. So any directions that would need to, any actions rather that would need to be taken would happen manually by the spacecraft autonomously versus manually by the crew. Dragon now closing in on 60 meters away from the International Space Station.
As it gets closer, we get a clearer and clearer view of the Dragon spacecraft. Again, you can still see some of those thrusters are firing with the graphic in your bottom left-hand screen.
And in addition to the nose cone being open, we can see a portion of Dragon's trunk there, and that black portion on the upper left of your screen there is actually the solar arrays on Dragon.
Yeah, we actually use that during flight to help power the vehicle. Once it's on station, though, we'll connect some umbilicals, and we will utilize the power from the space station for Dragon during its stay.
So the next milestone that we are looking ahead towards today is the arrival at Waypoint 2, which is when Dragon Freedom is 20 meters away from the International Space Station. As you can see on your screen there, we're now 41 meters away.
Just a couple minutes away from docking. We call docking when the Dragon spacecraft first makes contact with the International Space Station, again expected for 12:11 p.m. Pacific time. And now you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, that is the docking adapter. So you can follow along when we make that soft capture with the hooks in the soft capture, as well as hard capture with there's 12 hooks that will connect with the International Space Station to lock it in. The range is now on your left bottom corner. We are just at Waypoint 2, just about 20 meters away from the International Space Station. You can see all those thrusters firing on the Dragon spacecraft to maintain alignment with the docking adapter just right before we approach. They are doing a very short pause here at Waypoint 2, holding until the Dragon spacecraft automatically begins the approach for docking.
And you can start to see Dragon be eclipsed by a bit of a shadow here. That is because we are actually passing over the terminator line. And that is when the distinction between night and day occurs as the International Space Station orbits the Earth.
All players, this is Houston on the Big Loop. Dragon is on final approach and is go for docking. Please monitor per steps 5 and 6 in 1.102, Dragon approach and retreat monitoring.
Station copies, monitoring step 5 and 6.
Great news. Great news. We did get that confirmation that we are go for docking.
And that coming from the Capcom, or going up to the crew rather, that is Capcom Jacob Lesarge. That was up to NASA astronaut Chris Williams, who is in the cupola as we speak, monitoring approach and docking, now nearing in on 16 meters away from the International Space Station. About 30 seconds prior to docking, we might hear the call out, or we will hear the call out for CHOP, which stands for Crew Hands-Off Point. At this point, any aborts will have to be done automatically by Dragon. And the crew on board the space station can also send a retreat command to Dragon if needed. Dragon now 14 meters away from the International Space Station, closing in.
Again, what you can expect after Dragon makes contact with the International Space Station is that 12 hooks will be deployed, 6 at a time. Once those have hard captured, we will attach umbilicals to provide power between Dragon and power and connections between Dragon and the International Space Station.
Meters.
Copy, 10.
Just hearing some call-outs between the crew and the core of the distance between Dragon and the International Space Station, just under 10 meters.
Closing in on 8 meters, we'll stand by for the call out of CHOP. That's that crew hands-off period. Freedom is approaching 5 meters away from the International Space Station.
Copy, 5.
You can now clearly see on your screen the docking adapter on Dragon as it's approaching the International Space Station. A great view from the International Space Station. You can see the short distance between Dragon, just 3 meters away.
Meters.
Copy, 2.
Continuing to close in.
1 meter.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Dragon contact and soft capture complete.
Dragon copy. Soft capture complete.
And contact confirmed. Dragon made contact with the International Space Station at 12:15 p.m. Pacific time, flying 277 statute miles over South Africa.
And there are still a few steps to complete before Dragon is securely attached to station. We'll complete the soft capture ring retraction. And just a few minutes later, the hard capture sequence will begin. And about 10 minutes after that contact moment.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Ring retraction in progress.
Copy.
There's just a call out for that soft capture ring retraction, starting that sequence there. Again, about 10 minutes after first contact will be when Dragon hard docking is completed. That's when all 12 of the hooks on Dragon have connected with the International Space Station. And there are 12 hooks, but 6 will begin the process for capture at a time. Again, you can follow that. A little hard to see the graphic in your bottom right-hand screen there, but you can follow along with the hard capture docking sequence there on that graphic. And there, that's a little bit better view of that bottom right-hand corner hard capture graphic there.
And again, if you're just joining us, we did have a docking at 12:15 p.m. Pacific time while the International Space Station was flying over South Africa. Crew-12 did launch on February 13th at 2:15 a.m. Pacific time and is comprised of NASA astronauts Jessica Meir and Jack Hathaway, as well as European Space Agency or ESA astronaut Sophie Adenot and Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrey Fedyaev. And as you can see on your screen there, they are now docked to the zenith port of the International Space Station. The soft capture system will now begin retracting to bring the spacecraft in closer for a hard capture, which is accomplished by deploying 12 hooks in 2 sets of 6.
And the crew is still seated in their seats all the way through hard capture. Once the vehicle is hard docked to the International Space Station, they can get out of those seats and actually doff their suits and get a little bit more comfortable inside the Dragon spacecraft as they wait for the hatch to open to the International Space Station.
So Dragon soft capture system will now begin retracting to
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Bring retraction complete. Docking sequence holding for MCS reconfiguration.
And you did hear that confirmation that the soft capture retreat is complete. Next up will be hard capture, which is accomplished by deploying 12 hooks, 2 sets of 6 hooks to firmly hold Dragon in place. And that process does take about 15 minutes or so. Then once all docking events are successful, flight controllers will configure Dragon for docked operations and connect power and data to the spacecraft. At that point, the crew will be able to get out of their spacesuits and set them up to dry and begin operations to get the hatches open and join the expedition crew on board the space station. That does include pressurizing the vestibule, which NASA astronaut Chris Williams will be primed to do, as well as a round of leak checks. And that does take about 2 hours before the hatches will be open today. Following that, we'll have a welcome ceremony before the crew goes into a safety briefing and begins to get up to speed and adjust to life on the International Space Station following their liftoff from Florida yesterday at 2:15 a.m. Pacific. It's been an approximately 34-hour rendezvous for Crew-12 following their liftoff. They did dock today at 12:15 p.m. Pacific while flying south of South Africa.
Now, as we're waiting for hard capture to complete, you're looking at a view on the left-hand side. That is mission control here in Hawthorne, as well as on your right-hand screen, mission control Houston at Johnson's Space Center. The teams are still working in tandem together while the crew is still on board Dragon, but once that hatch is open and the crew can make their way onto the International Space Station, Johnson will take it from there.
Station Houston on the Big Loop. MCS configured. We are proceeding with hook driving.
Station copies.
Great news. That means that the hard capture sequence is now beginning. This takes just a few minutes, about 4 minutes, to complete that hard capture. It'll be 6 hooks at a time for 12 hooks total to complete that hard docking.
And we don't currently have views of Dragon and the International Space Station at this moment due to a handover between satellites, which happens from time to time and is expected. But on the left hand of your screen there, you do see Mission Control here in Hawthorne, California, as well as on the right hand of your screen, Mission Control in Houston, Texas. We still are in integrated operations where we have the big loop configured. That big loop is between both Mission Control centers in Hawthorne and Houston, as well as the crew on the International Space Station and the crew inside of Freedom, who just docked to the International Space Station about 8 minutes ago at 12:15 p.m. Pacific. Hooks are continuing to drive and work through the procedures for that hard mate between Dragon, Freedom, and the International Space Station. With Freedom now docked to the International Space Station, there are 7 visiting spacecraft on board. That includes NASA's SpaceX 33rd Cargo Resupply Mission, JAXA, Japan Aerospace Agency's HTV X-1, Northrop Grumman's Cygnus 23 spacecraft, the Roscosmos Soyuz MS-28, as well as 2 Roscosmos cargo spacecraft, Progress 92 and Progress 93.
And as Sandra mentioned, we don't have any live views at this moment, so we are just waiting for confirmation of the hard capture, that is the 12 hooks latching on to the International Space Station. We should just have a couple minutes left in that sequence. We'll wait for that call out for that confirmation.
And once Crew-12 gets on board the International Space Station, they will complete some training as part of emergency procedures and get acquainted with their new home for the next 8 months. The key point of their mission is to conduct a variety of science experiments to help advance research and technology for future Moon and Mars missions and to benefit humanity back on Earth. Some of this research includes a study on pneumonia-causing bacteria that could help improve treatments here on Earth, as well as on-demand IV fluid generation for future space missions. They're also going to be working on an automated plant health monitoring investigation, as well as investigations of plant and nitrogen-fixing microbe interactions, which could help enhance food production in space, as well as here on the ground. As we think about long-duration missions to the Moon and Mars, growing our own food is going to be critical, as it may not always be possible to send cargo space flights up. So this investigation could lead to improved plant growth on board the International Space Station and then eventually onto the Moon and Mars. The first set of hooks is now closed, and the second set is traveling.
SpaceX on the big loop, hard capture complete. And at this time, you are go to step into suit doffing.
At gentle contact, we have bridged the legacy of humankind's continuous presence in space, spanning more than 25 years at this very site. The International Space Station is more than a structure. It is a promise kept, decades in the making, built by nations, sustained by trust and partnership, and powered by science, innovation, and curiosity. As we look back at Earth from these windows, we are reminded that cooperation is not just possible, it is essential. Up here, there are no borders, and hope is universal.
I want to thank the teams at NASA, SpaceX, ESA, CSA, JAXA, and Roscosmos. Your work has guided us safely here across the vastness of space to this outpost where all of humanity lives and learns together. Crew-12 was honored to join our Expedition 74 friends and colleagues, Sergei Kuznetsov, Sergei Mikhaev, and Chris Williams, to add our chapter to the story of the International Space Station.
Et maintenant, un mot pour les Français. Bonjour les Français depuis la capsule Dragon SpaceX avec l'équipage Crew-12. Un grand merci à toutes les équipes de SpaceX, de la NASA, de l'ESA, du CNES, de Roscosmos, de la CSA et JAXA qui contribuent directement au succès de cette mission. Nous venons nous amarrer à la Station spatiale internationale après 34 heures de vol libre. Tout se passe de manière nominale et la Terre est vraiment, vraiment belle depuis là-haut. Merci à vous de votre soutien et de votre enthousiasme, ça nous fait chaud au cœur. Je suis fière d'embarquer la France et l'Europe dans cette incroyable aventure qui dépasse les frontières. Comptez sur moi pour en partager toutes les étapes avec vous et faire briller les étoiles dans les yeux des Français. Prenez soin de vous et à bientôt. Over to Andrey.
Отличная работа, ребята. Всем большое спасибо.
We're grateful to be on board and we're ready to get to work.
And those were some words from our Crew-12 crew that arrived to the International Space Station at 12 p.m. Pacific this afternoon. We did get confirmation as well that all of the hooks...
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Good words there. We're going to continue monitoring the docking sequence, and I'll maintain awareness with you. You are go to doff suits per 4.012 and begin cabin configurations in 4.400 in parallel. For awareness, we will have big loop comms only until 2038. So again, we're big loop comms only. And at this time, I can report docking complete.
Copy, that's complete and big loop comms only.
Great news. Docking is officially complete. Now that Dragon has completed its docking sequence, the spacecraft must undergo a handful of checks before the hatch is opened. The crew on board Dragon will now get a chance to get out of their suits and get comfortable before moving into hatch operations.
That's right, and things will be picking up inside the space station too as NASA's Chris Williams gets the hatch on the station side ready to be opened and starts pressurizing that area known as the vestibule between the Dragon and station hatches. With Dragon docked, that's going to do it for us here in Hawthorne, but our coverage for Crew-12 won't stop here.
In a minute, we're going to toss it over to Leah in Mission Control Houston to take us through the vestibule depressurization and hatch opening, when we'll see NASA astronauts Jessica Meir and Jack Hathaway, European Space Agency astronaut Sophie Adenot, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrey Fedyaev float into the International Space Station. But first, let's have a quick recap here. They got suited up and took a very short ride to the launch pad, ingressed on Dragon, and then yesterday, February 13th at 2:15 a.m. Pacific time, 5:15 a.m. Eastern, the 9 Merlin 1D engines ignited and Falcon 9 lifted off from Space Launch Complex 2040, beginning Crew-12's journey to the International Space Station. Our Stage 1 vehicle came back down to Earth and landed at our newest recovery site, Landing Zone 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Base. Dragon then separated from Falcon 9's second stage, allowing Dragon to fly free with Crew-12 on board. We had a good nose cone deploy, as well as completed 5 major burns on Dragon, and then docking was confirmed today at 12:15 p.m. Pacific, 3:15 p.m. Eastern Time today, February 14th, 2026.
And you can follow at SpaceX on X and NASA on social media for real-time updates. Thanks again for watching. Go NASA, go SpaceX, and go Crew-12. And for those of you watching on X, please head over to NASA Plus to follow the coverage live.
Thanks for being with us today, Sandra. It was great to have you. And thank you to everybody for tuning in.
Now over to Leah Cheshire at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston to continue sharing the mission as the crew prepares to board their home for the next several months, the International Space Station. And thank you once more. And for those celebrating Valentine's Day today, we truly hope your day is out of this world.